Howdy hi campers, and welcome to the Triple Takeover Toycast, a fortnightly podcast dedicated to our beloved robots in disguise, the Transformers, as well as other toy lines from the past. Eventually, we promise. As always, I am joined by a photographer, writer, and a man with an unreasonable dislike of Omnibot chatter, M.A.S.K, also known as TFsquareone.
Oh, come on. Seriously? We're 30 seconds in.
So true.
You've done this to yourself. You've deprived all of our listeners of these wonderful little moments. And I'm also joined by writer, photographer, YouTuber, and a person who, in the time it's taken me to say this, has probably bought the entirety of Beast Wars Neo. It's Sixo.
That implies that I don't have it all already, of course.
I knew that when I was writing it down.
I don't.
Now you do.
Yeah. Now.
Yeah. Just click by. And I'm Toybox Soapbox, or as my dentist calls me, Liam. Today's episode is episode 9, I'm certain, and we are talking about Transformers who are living in a box. They're living in a cardboard box. Join us as we deep dive into your recycling bin and discuss all things packaging. Guys, how are you doing?
That's me clapping for his intro.
It was a very good intro, mate. What can I say?
Now I've already peaked, because my only goal every time we record is to make Maz laugh at least once. And now I've done it, I'm like,
there you go.
Now, isn't it?
2 minutes in, you can just end the episode right there and then.
Thanks for listening, guys.
A reference to Living in a Box, the single by the band Living in a Box from the album Living in a Box.
Those guys knew their lane. They knew what they were about. It's all about boxes, like us apparently.
Yes.
Okay, so guys, how are you? How are you both?
All good, thanks. Yeah, doing really well here. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Football's been on loads. I know you love that, Sixo. I know you've been watching all of it, haven't you?
Mate, honestly, the old football. I got nothing against football. It's just not really my jam. It's fair to say.
It's not your bag of pretender hats, is it?
Exactly that. That's a good. Yeah, I like that analogy. No, it's not really my bag of pretender hats. It's fair to say. I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, but I think my thing with football extends back to not being able to watch Transformers on a Saturday morning when my stepfather used to want to watch the football instead. Pretty sure that's where it started anyway.
That's a long-standing grudge.
Yeah, it is, but, it's quite a serious thing, isn't it? Old Saturday morning cartoons when you're that age, so you don't forget.
What absolutely amazed me the other day is when England played, I was sort of looking through Twitter, and popping into my Twitter feed there was a tweet from Sixo in 2018 talking about England being eliminated from a tournament.
Was there?
Like, oh, yeah. I know it was talking about something else. It was talking about Transformers, but there was just a little note about England being eliminated. And I was like, there
he was less on brand back then. He was less on brand back in 2018.
Engagement, wasn't it?
It was before we wrote the corporate Bible, so I guess, back then the social media strategy these days is much more streamlined.
So how about you, Maz? How have you been?
All good. I'm all good. Thank you very much. There's been a lot of banter on social media between us with enablement and what we've all gone and bought in the meantime. And as if I hadn't fallen down enough rabbit holes from the previous episodes, like there's Binal Tech coming my way, as well as car robots now as well. It's just, and we haven't even done the episode on that yet. And this is becoming a very expensive podcast.
The car robots one, I think, is the funniest for me, is because you've
preempted.
both... Well, exactly. We haven't even recorded it yet, and you've both kind of started to fall down that little rabbit hole to varying degrees. I think it's kind of funny, but I can't wait to see what happens when the episode itself rolls round. It's going to be brilliant.
Well, after the way the Binal Tech prices seem to shoot up, trying to get ahead of the curve here, get some of them in.
I think it's.
They're onto us, really.
Yeah, exactly. I know we said it last time, actually, but I've just been so loving seeing everybody posting pictures of their Binal Tech. And I had at least 2 or 3 tags today alone from people going, oh, look what I've dug out the loft. And one guy actually posted a picture of their BT-17 that they'd finally purchased. And they said that they decided that it was time to complete their Binal Tech collection. Yeah, I was like, wow, that's really cool. Do you know what I mean? How amazing. So I think, it's weird when you record this to think, how many people are listening or how big an influence does it have or whatever. But just judging by the number of people that are getting focus on something that they've maybe not thought about in a long time, I don't know, it's very rewarding.
It's been 6 weeks now, so it wasn't just like a flash in the pan for that week. It's like six
No.
weeks on from the episode, and we're still doing it, and they're still doing it.
Well,
So-
I was going to say we've not really shut up about it since, have we?
that's
So
it, yeah.
I'm still talking about vinyl tech all the time.
Well,
And
so
now-
today was my first day back in the office, and I actually used the opportunity to bring home my BT07 smokescreen. So now it's one I felt like I needed to bring it home and photograph it some more. So it's still having an effect.
Yeah, definitely. And that has some very nice packaging as well, can I say? I've
Yes.
been reacquainting myself with BT packaging, of course, of late.
Yeah.
And just how nice it is, actually. One thing I did think with that packaging is how you can tell how collector-orientated that line is. We didn't talk about the actual boxes from Vinyl Tech. We talked about the artwork a bit in that episode. But the packaging, you can tell it's very different to like particularly the latter day alternators packaging. How it's still got a kind of collector slant to it, but just the fact that you have to kind of cut it to get into it and all of that, it's much more kind of mainline focused in its way.
Yeah,
whereas
it's made to be disposable, basically.
100%. Whereas just the way that BT is, you can tell that these are toys that are designed to go back in the box and be displayed if you want, and it's really, really cool.
And that was like one of the first instances of real collector packaging as well, wouldn't it? That would have been then.
I guess so, yeah.
Well, beyond the
Probably was.
reissues, I suppose. Beyond the G1 reissues, it probably was.
You're thinking what, book box?
Yeah, I guess the collector's edition ones as well, because they had such a vintage feel to the way that those... And the thing is, they were coming out in Japan, and Takara packaging for G1 wasn't entirely like Hasbro packaging, but those collector's edition and e-hobby releases were done in like Hasbro style dimensions with a collector's card on the front, made to be able to be displayed without being opened if that's what you fancied.
I got to tell you, I mean, it's on my mental list to talk about that collector's edition packaging tonight, because it's actually some of my favorite in many ways. And for one simple reason, it stacks and it looks beautiful when it's all stacked from the
uniformly
side.
sized.
Yeah. Which I'm a big fan of, because a lot of G1 packaging is a nightmare in that regard. But that collector's edition packaging, I don't know. I just love the fact that they've got all the carbots, even stuff like Grapple or whatever that's like a little bit larger, just kind of lined up in uniform size boxes, and it all kind of fits. They've just got distinct inner trays, but the actual cardboard itself is the same.
Yeah.
Which is
even two cassettes managed to.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's a really, really good way of doing it. But even then the jets and stuff like that all have their own, there's a little sequence for them. I think from memory, actually, the Insecticons, or I forget now, but they were in the same packaging as the jets. Correct. And so it's just really nicely done.
So the last episode we did was all about toy photography, and we all had a great time doing that one. And we all had actually a lot of interesting thoughts ourselves, don't we, afterwards? But it's been great seeing the reaction online, hasn't it?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it as well. I think it was a really, I guess, quite a personal episode in a lot of ways, because it's a subject that we all. There's a lot in there. I guess it was difficult to know exactly how we were going to approach it. Is it like uber technical, or kind of what angle were we going to go at it with? And I think for me, it felt right to just kind of talk more generally about what we enjoy about that aspect of the hobby and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it feels like the reaction to it has been really good. For me, what was really interesting is seeing a couple of, big name, very established, very professional Transformers photographers in the community responding to us and saying that it really resonated for them, and that was rewarding.
Agree completely. Yeah, I was also surprised by that, and pleasantly surprised by the fact that people didn't seem to comment that we didn't go technical enough. Like, nobody seemed to say I was expecting a full lesson in the relationship between ISO, shutter speed, and all the rest of it. So it obviously means that we pitched it at a level that was interesting, informative, but also personal. So that was spot on. It's what we want for this, isn't it, basically?
And that's how it was intended, wasn't it? It wasn't supposed to be like an instructional guide. It was just sort of our experiences and sort of a few tips here and there. But one of the threads people have picked up on quite a lot was the imposter syndrome, wasn't it? That's been it's come up quite a lot. And I think, like Sixo was saying a minute ago about how it being quite personal and, not fully wanting to sort of step into it like that. I think that we all felt like that a little bit, didn't we? Where we sort of stepped back a little bit and kind of withheld it. And then we were talking about it afterwards. And it sort of came up that, yeah, maybe that's something to come back to in a future episode, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't just apply to toy photography. It's toy writing and toy reviewing, anything that requires you to put your personal feelings or any element of creativity into an established community space, whatever the subject.
Yeah, because even just sharing stuff like that, you're still sharing stuff about yourself, aren't you? And that's how it sort of felt there. So even myself, I know I sort of felt a little bit guarded, not wanting to say certain things because it's a podcast, isn't it? You sort of want to give off a certain impression sometimes. And but I think that would actually be quite interesting. And it's been quite enlightening reading a lot of the response that people have had, particularly to that section.
Yeah, I think it's been remarkable seeing some people that, as I sort of said, that are very well established, and people that are talking about that that idea of imposter syndrome, and the people that clearly felt that was something that they could kind of identify with. It's telling, and it is good to share that sort of mental headspace a little bit sometimes.
I mean, it's really easy as a person to just look at other people and think they're just better human beings. They're a different class of person that's just better at everything than I am. It's a very natural response to things when other people do things well. You don't know the story behind why they're like that. And as far-fetched as it might seem, our discussion on packaging today, I reckon I will be able to touch on that sentiment again when it comes to packaging in our various discussions. Might not seem connected, but I've definitely got a couple of things to say about that.
Oh, I'm excited about that.
Don't be.
So we are gathered here today to talk about those cardboard presents that Hasbro seal our toys in, the packaging. So guys, what is the actual purpose of the packaging?
Well, I guess it's twofold, isn't it? I think
was that a packaging joke? It's twofold.
Yeah, well, it wasn't meant to be. Honestly, it wasn't meant to be.
It was a well-packaged joke.
Yo, there we go. Gosh, I'm going to need to be on top form today, quite clearly. I just folded it in. That was on the spur of the moment, I swear.
That's the dad joke. There it is. That's the one.
Yeah. My poor old wife, honestly, I tell you, she has to live with this kind of stuff day in, day out. So anyway, I was going to say, I think it's twofold. Seriously, I do. Because I guess from a purely practical point of view, packaging is there to ship the toy, isn't it? Because quite simply, if you didn't have the packaging, it would just be toy in a bag or whatever it would be. But then clearly at some point, they've thought, okay, we need to make the packaging very attractive, and actually it helps to sell the toy as well. I think when I think about packaging, and I'm sure we'll cover this as we go through, I very much think of my childhood and what it looked like, back in the day, the kind of sunburst G1 packaging, all of that, how eye-catching it was. And so for me, it's a practical thing, but also a very visual thing as well that kind of sells the excitement for the toy.
It's basically an advert, isn't it? Inside the toy store.
Yeah, it really is. And I think when you look at the effort that goes into some of the packaging, some more than others, but even kind of some of your most basic releases, apart from maybe some real bargain basement, KOs and third party and stuff that maybe some of them, not all, because a lot do, but some don't bother. There's generally a bench level of effort with packaging anyway to make it look enticing. And there are some really extreme examples. I mean, things like Headmasters and stuff like that, again, G1, that for me is like top tier stuff that just immediately makes you excited for the contents. You just can't wait to get it open and check it out.
I mean, don't forget that back in the day, Transformers wasn't an established name, and it had to stand out among established things like, Masters of the Universe or whatever else was really, popular at the time. So the packaging would have been an enormous part of selling that product. And you can just tell that there are periods of time in Transformers history where the packaging is doing a lot of work. It's working overtime.
Fighting crime.
It's talking of packaging. M.A.S.K. packaging is spectacular, isn't it? Yeah. So yes, I mean, that packaging from the 80s is a reason why it's remembered so fondly, because they were just some crazy competition going on there between some top tier toy lines to grab the attention. All those black and white photos you're seeing surfacing now of toy aisles from the 80s, and just what these aisles of toy stores look like, wall to wall, amazing toy lines that are, have all aged extremely well and have big fandoms. At the time, to be able to gain someone's attention and get them to buy that toy for their kid or for themselves, the packaging was obviously a massive avenue and with plenty of investment.
Yeah, and I think you can really see that with, I mean, not just Transformers, but stuff like, I mean, Liam, you were sharing some pictures of Master of the Universe earlier. I know it's a new toy, but
Yeah.
for me, it was highly evocative of
Yes.
that packaging from the 80s as well,
It's very
and just
deliberate, though.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's meant because it's they're basically the old toys with joints, aren't they? And they've done that with the packaging as well. So they've gone into the same sort of level of recreation of the packaging. There's new art, but that looks exactly like the old art. It's amazing.
Which has been very successful in Transformers as well. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of packaging, when you get a lot of retro stuff, whether that's reissues or some third party. I've always seen it online. When you share pictures of new third party items, sometimes if it's very often packaging that evokes what it used to look like from whatever period that was, people go nuts for it if it reminds them of their childhood. There was one recently, Fans Hobby did. I was thinking of Generation 1 because there's been numerous examples, but even Fans Hobby did their Armada Optimus Prime recently, and the box looked a lot like the old Armada packaging, and people just go crazy for it. They really love that kind of feeling of nostalgia. So it's clearly a good way to go. But I did think that Masters of the Universe, those paintings and all of that, was just beautiful. It really kind of reminded me of the old Masters of the Universe packaging, but also the kind of back of the box battles from Transformers as well, in their way. The kind of painted scenes and everything that are just so nice.
Have you looked up the Castle Grayskull they've done?
I haven't.
You should look at the box because it's done in the same style and it's just this giant painting.
It's glorious. It's absolutely glorious. I've seen that a little bit here and there. It's really, really nice.
It's one of those where the boxes, you typically throw them away, but when you see something like that, it's almost like I can't buy it because I'd have to keep the box. It's so big.
But would you call that a success then in this day and age? If think about it, you've got this amazing packaging, and the packaging is there to protect the product, to sell the product. But then when you get it, the packaging is so nice, you want to keep the packaging. So yeah, I guess it is a success, isn't it? Because yes, you want to keep the packaging, but if the toy looks amazing in the packaging, you start thinking, oh, do I really want to take this toy off its bubble? And that actually brings me on to a point I wanted to make, like Takara, when they released their Transformers Series 1 and 2 in 1985, they did Series 1 and 2 together. Obviously, even things like Minibots had styro inserts. G1 cars had styro inserts, Insecticons had styro inserts, so that you could put the toy back in there and display it in the box. And if you look a little bit earlier on in like early Diaclone and stuff like that, they didn't all have artwork. A lot of the time, it was just a massive window box where the toys inside the packet were doing all of the work to sell that product. There was no massive artwork on all of them. Sometimes you did get artwork, but if you think of like Diaclone Mirage, there was just a photograph of the toy in robot mode, and the car was this massive cellophane window where you could see the entire car. Powered Convoy DX gift sets, a big, Diaclone Ultra Magnus in robot mode, and two really gorgeous sports cars, and then like a picture of the toy. No, I think it's artwork actually in the bottom right corner, but the artwork is not the draw there.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually. And actually, you're right. Seeing how Takara packaging, how much it varies from Hasbro. As you were saying that, with all the things like throttle bots, and all of that kind of stuff being in styro boxes, I always thought was fascinating versus the carded bubbles and everything that Hasbro was going for at the time. And, certainly from a collector point of view, it's way preferable, because it keeps the toys a lot safer, and, the packaging itself doesn't get ruined when you open it.
Right. And of course, Takara packaging was a lot smaller as well. It's far more compact.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's ever really prepared for the first time they get a G1 car in a Takara box compared to a massive, what is now cavernous G1 Hasbro.
It's one thing I think all the time, actually, is how big some of those original Generation 1 boxes are, because they're huge just compared to the actual size of the toys, particularly you're right, the G1 cars, because of how small those cars are, actually. And I think the size of the cars surprises people as well, to be fair. But the boxes, in comparison to the toy, certainly there's a load of wasted space. The amount of actual, the cardboard insert that you have, the amount of space on that insert around the bubble, for some examples anyway, things like Blue Streak and stuff like that, is really quite surprising at times to see. Quite interesting, and just you wouldn't get that now, I don't think, in the same way.
And don't forget, those toys all had the the vertical flap saying Transformers on it.
Yes.
And if you go back to Diaclone, they didn't even have that. It was just the cuboid. And Sunstreaker even had a smaller box than the regular cars. So you stack a Sunstreaker box next to a Sideswipe box. The Sunstreaker box is even smaller. So it's even more compact than all of the other Diaclone boxes that came afterwards.
So the flap was very of its era, wasn't it? So what was the... I mean, I don't know, actually. Do you know what the logic of the flap was? Why that happened? Was that just to kind of attract people some way? Or
I think if you look at a Transformers box layout, you've got the cellophane window that showcases the car inside or the plane inside or whatever it is. Then the right-hand side of the box is entirely dominated by this beautiful piece of painted artwork. So the flap was basically the only real estate they had to put the branding on. This is Transformers. Right. I think that's probably the thinking. And then obviously it allowed for a larger surface area on the back to put these beautiful murals.
It's just funny now, after all these years, and obviously, buying and selling vintage G1, the number of conversations that I had about flaps, and the condition of the flap and whatever else.
Yeah. Flap crease is a thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. It's a huge
thing.
How
floppy is it?
Right. I was selling a Weird Wolf just the other day. It's just sold, and actually no flap crease. And it's a thing. When you see it, you just think, "Wow, this looks amazing." You know what I mean? It makes such a difference now in terms of.
And why does it make a difference? Because it makes someone feel like they're buying a pristine item that has been perfectly preserved from its original era, and that evokes all of those emotions of nostalgia and. Oh, I mean, how many collectors I know who collect box G1 because they want to recreate the look of toy aisles in the 80s where they would just walk down and it'd be wall-to-wall Transformers in their packaging, beautifully stacked, loads of untouched bubbles, perfect flaps, no creases. That's what they want to recreate in their own collections. That feeling is evocative.
Yeah, well, exactly. I guess, I've already kind of alluded to that, and that's certainly when the subject of packaging came up, that was the first image, I suppose, in my brain was, being in Woolworths as a kid, kind of, running around the corner, where are the Transformers? And seeing that aisle of sunburst packaging, all the kind of red and orange and all of that. And just beautiful, absolutely beautiful to see. And just poring over the different toys that were there, kind of hunting through. But the packaging definitely was a huge draw, I think, on that. And you mentioned the character artwork, and I'm sure we'll get into that a bit as well. But all of that was just so exciting. It really just kind of brought the product to life. I think you're right. The toy was a huge part of it because obviously it was a great big window. You could see what was inside. I really like with Transformers packaging that, of course, you see very often the alt mode, inside, and then they've got the picture, kind of showing you what the robot is going to look like as well. Mm-hmm. But it's not the actual toy, even though there are pictures of the toy on there as well. And it's really that character artwork that I think kind of, I don't know, does the heavy lifting in your imagination of like, okay, this is how cool this toy is going to be.
And it worked for other toy lines as well. I find myself drawn to other toy lines currently, like Starcom. And I think it was seeing a boxed Shadow Parasite on Twitter and seeing the box for that and thinking, that's probably the most synthwavy 80s thing I've seen. How have I never seen that? And just looking at the box for that toy, I just want that packaging in my collection so I can appreciate that lovely look and color. And I reckon that's probably what's attracting me to that toy line more than anything else. It's just the packaging. It just really helps that the fact that toy has a stunning, translucent, purpley pink cockpit that's everything I want in an 80s toy. So
I've got 3 of them behind me, Mazda, just to let you know.
He'll want the box. Have you got a box?
Yeah, it's not the same, is it?
He'll want the box.
Not complete.
I want the box. And the thing is, I don't even want the Euro box. It's the one with the grid pattern on the top part of the box.
Oh man, this is the man. Let's not forget to just loop him back into RID and Car Robots. This is the man that we've been trying to convince to pick up a Superfire Convoy but then, I want one in a certain condition, maybe sealed, and okay, so we'll find one for the right price and whatever else. Yeah, but I really want one with this packaging. Okay, so we find the right one in the right packaging for the right price. Yeah, but I really want it sealed in that packaging as well.
No. I didn't buy it sealed in the end,
Well,
did I?
that's true.
I
was a
chose the packaging over the
Yes.
condition in the end.
You are right, but it was. I suppose it was really interesting to me, and I'm taking the mickey a little bit, but actually I do admire it, because for me, I can't say I've never done that. Like, I have hunted for some items specifically for certain types of packaging or whatever, but often it's based on what I've already got. So for example, at the moment I've got 2/3 of a Japanese Magnaboss. And so, of course, I would be looking for, Lio Junior, the third part in the equivalent packaging to complete that set. So that's, I do that, but I never really have any particular hard and fast rules about, like, okay, it's got to be this particular type of packaging or whatever.
But do you want that in the particular box because the first two happen to be in that style of box, or did you deliberately hunt those first two in that box because that's your preferred packaging?
Actually, I did the numbers game and concluded that they were going to pop up more frequently in the separate packaging than in the gift set. And they do pop up in the gift set, but it tends to go like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, when the gift set appears online, some bugger buys it within half an hour. Do you know what I mean? And it's gone. Whereas the singular ones tend to sit a little bit. They're a little bit more widely available for a good price. So that was purely practicality there, I think. There are examples though. I'm trying to think what it was now, but there was some things in, like, Generation 2, for example, is probably a good example where a lot of stuff is multilingual, the cards and things. And we've got a friend who has picked up a lot of that stuff as well, and would often ask, are you getting those in the particular language or the American ones or whatever it may be? Because you can get very often American packaging or European packaging, which is often multilingual. And I'm not fast, really. Do you know what I mean? There were some Generation 2 lines that I did mix and match and things like that, which some people would say is sacrilege, but for me, it's kind of only fun as long as the journey for that subline ends, and then I'll typically move the packaging on, to be honest, or whatever. I don't keep that much packaging, just practicality wise or whatever. So I don't know. For me, the Superfire Convoy was interesting, but I do respect it as well, and I see it as, I know for you, it's like a little added criteria, I suppose, to kind of make the hunt more interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely a limiting factor that stopped me buying, because it's not a particularly rare toy at all. And I think there are far more examples of the art box version of the closed box Superfire Convoy than
for sure
but that was the one that was available at the time that I really got interested. And that's the one that I associate with my 20-year lust to explore that toy and explore this toy line. And I just wanted to tick off the long-standing desire that I had for that particular packaging. And yeah, so eventually I didn't even buy a sealed one, and they're plentiful, sealed ones. But instead I bought one that was an incredible price, I have to say. But it was in that box, and I chose that over buying a sealed one because it was just what I wanted. I'm okay with it not being sealed because it's in great condition, and it's the box I want. Yeah, it's a box I'll keep, which, like Liam says, actually, like, maybe that's a problem because I end up buying things in boxes that I want to keep, which creates a space problem. I mean, I don't know how many episodes that calls back to in one go, but it really does.
Yeah, we're calling back to all of them today.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, the space thing is that's always a consideration for me. That's the thing. But at the same time, I don't know. I was thinking about this recently, like with vintage toys. It's interesting because really boxes very often are not an indication of quality at all. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could buy something that's loose and it's in better condition than something that just randomly comes with the box. But you pay more for the box. Of course you do.
Yeah.
But I think there is, and I know I'm also guilty of this, a tendency to only look at box listings or consider box listings as being somehow better, as if like people have taken more care of it. And I know it's
a very valid assumption, I think, and probably 9 times out of 10, it's probably a fair assumption.
But you can skip over very decent loose items as well.
Which, if you ever sell your collection, someone would end up doing, because they would skip over all of your loose stuff that you now have without packaging because it doesn't have packaging.
Yeah. Well, not that I would ever sell it, of course, but that's,
Unthinkable.
yeah, exactly. Imagine. But no, it's an interesting one because I think you can skip over stuff in that regard. But equally, the boxes and things like that. I don't know. For me, I love the idea of having them all at one stage and then just practicality crept in, and particularly with G1, and particularly as I already kind of said, because they don't stack in any way. I had amassed the majority of 1987 boxes. I say the majority, a lot of them. I had the Horicons, I had a lot of the Headmasters, Target Masters, all of that kind of shebang, and some 88 as well, so Power Masters, things like that. And I think I was trying to kind of make a nice looking, sort of semi display with it on this, so they're all on the side, so you've got the side flaps. And there's just no way to stack them at all. Try as you might, it's always going to look like a bit of a kind of higgledy-piggledy mess. And I think it was at that point that I was like, so if they're, it's nice to have each one individually, but and there is some appeal there, but if there's no real way to make them look tidy, it was driving me nuts a little bit. And so I was kind of happy to move them on and recoup some of the, the outlay or whatever.
Just to go back to something you said a minute ago about minting box as well, is there is a world of difference, isn't there, between minting seal box and minting box. But like you say, sometimes when you're looking down, minting box is like the next one you go down to, even though, like you say, it's not actually representative of the quality of the toy.
Yeah,
because it's been opened.
It's so true. One thing actually that I've really come to like now in terms of buying vintage stuff is ruined boxes, because you pay so much less, for example, I got a sealed Action Master Elite windmill, which is not a rare toy, but to get in complete nice condition is hard. Like, it's very, it can go for silly money for a complete one, because it's got little rotors and things that go missing, and all too often it's just kind of been through the ringer or whatever. All of those Action Master Elites have got little mechanisms in them that get broken if they've been in the wrong hands, let's say. And so I got a sealed one, but it cost me, I think, a fraction of what it should have done. It was a ridiculous price, really, because the card that it came on was completely knackered and water damaged. The toy itself inside the bubble was perfect, absolutely mint, but the card was completely ruined.
So you've already eliminated the people who would collect sealed toys, who can't display it, and you've eliminated the people who can't bring themselves to unseal sealed toys.
Sealed G1, even though it's completely ruined, like the packaging. It was unusable. But for me, that was perfect. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to keep the packaging. I think I did actually sell the packaging in the end. I think I did. But for nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like somebody obviously, and I always, if I'm going to move packaging or kind of recycle it or whatever, with vintage, I don't recycle it, but I always kind of, I do recycle some modern stuff, but I always kind of give it a punt of like, well, someone might want this actually, even though I think it looks knackered, and even if it goes for like a couple of quid or whatever, maybe it means something to someone in their collection. And in that case, I think it did go. But yeah, that for me was perfect. So, but it's not the only example I can think of. I've had a few things where just the box is, disastrous, but the contents is fine.
That reminds me of when I think I sold it to you, didn't I? The Cinder Saw that was still sealed in the package, and the package was knackered and battered. I couldn't bring myself to open it, and then you bought it off me. And I assume you opened it then.
I actually still have it sealed, believe it or not. Yeah, I do, and I will open it at some point. But I actually looked at it today and was like, oh, I should really do that at some point. But it is nice to have.
It's so interesting how, just on the topic of vintage packaging and opening sealed toys, there was always a hierarchy of, vintage, first release, Hasbro packaging or Takara packaging from 84 to 88, where it was just like untouchable stuff. But then people would happily buy Classic Heroes gold box packaging and open that because it wasn't considered valuable or desirable in the slightest back in the day. But now,
that's changed.
The prices of sealed gold box Transformers are occasionally higher. Like finding a gold box Classic Optimus Prime sealed is now a license to print money. And I had one sealed not that many years ago. and it was just on the cusp of people finding it super interesting, but still not quite that into it. And I think I only sold it for £200, which is crazy. You just add a zero to that today. And the fact that it came from an ex-Hasbro employee is equally irritating. The fact that I should have just kept it instead of selling it. But yeah, gold box packaging now is hugely popular, and people need it to complete their variant packaged collections, especially Optimus Prime collectors. They're mad for it. Whereas, we still think you can buy Scramble City Guys, combiners on gold cards, and it still feels like they're a dime a dozen, and it's cool to open them.
I was going to say, actually, because that's how I got all of those guys, the Scramble City limbs. That was one that I did go after specific packaging, actually, because I think
Don't you mean special teams?
What did I say?
Scrambled City, young man.
Oh, well, yeah. Special teams. Okay, yeah. Special is being completely taken about. Yeah, okay. Special teams.
We're British, remember? We're British.
Yeah. Okay, yes. I'll put
Decepticon
on my...
strike planes.
Yes, exactly. Well, wasn't it someone... we had a comment. Someone said that they were putting on a British accent or something after listening to us on the old podcast.
More than one.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's quite funny. But yeah, it's... what was I going to say? Yeah,
Butler.
Exactly. We'll get him in one day. But the old special teams, I collected those on gold cards, actually, because, purely and simply, they were more plentiful than the original 86 cards. But it did become a bit of a mission to get them all on the same card. And actually, I think I said this in a previous episode, but Breakdown for me was the one that I just couldn't find anywhere. The Stunticons. I had the other... all the protector bots, everything, but I just couldn't find that one. And I saw it come up on the 86 card a few times, and I kept saying, nope, I'll wait. Do you know what I mean? And it was fun. It was fun to do.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah, that whole giving yourself a particular version of something. It does add to the achievement of it when you find it. And there was obviously a reason you picked those ones. But yeah,
I think initially
in the day, those would have been the ones that people would open. And why aren't there more breakdowns? There are loads of some of them.
Yeah.
But almost none of others.
Combaticons at 10 a penny.
Except Blastoff.
Yes, actually, that is true. Yes.
And then, like you said, Stunticons. And then there's no breakdown. But then I found a breakdown for £35, but I haven't seen one since. It's like... There are some which are tricky, really tricky.
So some of those, I mean, I haven't checked in the last however many years, but certainly some of those, those limb guys, you could get sealed for 20, 25 quid. They were plentiful. I don't know what it's like now, but yes, one or two of them, like you say, just a bit more difficult.
Yeah, tons of swindles. They're everywhere. So and I think it's First Aid as well. There's just loads of those.
Yeah.
First Aid is one of the most ubiquitous toys in this country, isn't he? I still find him in junk shops today. He's one of the very few Transformers you can almost guarantee there will be.
Twin Twist.
Yeah.
Twin Twist.
Power Master
very
Prime.
Green.
Yeah, it's true actually. But yeah, it is interesting doing all that hunting for that stuff. I mean, I suppose to clarify, just going back a step to talking about unsealing sealed vintage, it's not something that I make a habit of at all. And there's a lot of vintage stuff that I wouldn't look to collect sealed just because of the price of it, but then I wouldn't want to unseal it anyway, even if I had it, But some stuff I think I have unsealed one or two bits, do you know what I mean? Of course. But it's all stuff that is plentiful, and frankly, for some stuff, you're never, or certainly I felt I was never going to find it in the condition that I wanted it to be in. I'm talking stuff like Sparkerbots, for example, that just...
Because they're never going to be the toys that someone bought back in the day because it was so special looking. Unseal it and then put it on a shelf and preserve it. Those toys were bought because of the gimmick, because they were cheap and they were used.
Exactly, they were. Yeah, I mean, going back to Liam's Firecon, it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? The gimmick requires you to use it, and as soon as you do, you're scuffing it and whatever, and it just doesn't work properly. And,
it's like a pretender hat, isn't it?
Oh man, don't get me started on those.
Can I say something really controversial? And
go for it.
I know people won't agree with this, but because I knew we were doing packaging, I started thinking of this whole unsealing of vintage toys. And when I unsealed a vintage G1 Darkwing to sticker it up and do an article about it, that Darkwing was given to me for free. And the condition was you have to open it, you have to sticker it, and you have to write about it. That's the condition. You can have it for free. And it's funny because I felt at the time that I had a massive backlash against the opening of that toy, like I'd ruined something. Whereas in hindsight, when I looked back at all the comments across all platforms of social media, both in groups of young collectors and groups of more established veteran collectors, there's 2 people in the end who'd created a negative vibe about it. But it was such a resonant vibe that I still remember the negativity to today. But I was thinking to myself, and I hope this doesn't come across as arrogant or short-sighted, but if you take a vintage G1 toy, one that is not hyper rare, and you open it, you unseal it, the thinking is that you're denying the community, you're denying the history and the preservation of these toys. But who are you denying? There are enough examples of a particular toy, like Darkwing. There are so many photographs, and it exists in so many collections in a sealed and sometimes AFA or UKG graded state, that if anyone needs to see a historically sealed, preserved G1 Darkwing, there are many examples. So I'm not denying the community like that. Who am I denying? The only person I would be denying is the next person to buy it from me, because they wanted a sealed one. So that's one person I would be denying. I'm not denying myself, because what I wanted was a loose one. But by unsealing that toy, I did a ton of photographs. I did a proper sticker job on it, and now it's a proper resource photographically. I hope that the photographs are decent of the whole experience. And I know for a fact that I've brought more enjoyment to more people who read that article and saw those photographs versus the people who have suffered as a result of my opening that. The person I bought it from, I didn't even buy it from them. They wanted me to open it. I wanted to open it. And I struggled for a year before I opened that. It was in the shipping box for ages. So when I actually sat down and weighed it up and thought, who's actually suffering? What's the actual collateral damage to the hobby and the community and history and preservation versus who benefited from it? And it just wasn't a question in my mind after that. And that doesn't apply to every G1 toy. Certain G1 toys.
Yeah, there are levels, of course. Like if you, I don't know, I would say if you had, I don't know, like some incredibly rare Japanese Generation 1 thing, whatever it is, then yeah, for sure. If you had a Liakaiser or something sealed, then maybe this would be a different conversation. But
even Takara G1 is notorious for being opened by the stores that sold them originally and then double taped to put back on display. So, finding sealed vintage Diaclone is, forget about it. Is it legitimately sealed? You never know, because they were mostly opened. But something like a toy that has been mispackaged historically, like that Sunstreaker that you get in a sideswipe box, that shouldn't be unsealed, in my opinion, because it's a plentiful toy, and that is proof that this was sold in this fashion. That I think is a different level of preservation of history.
It's interesting because I really enjoyed that article about Darkwing that you did, and I remember reading it at the time. But I also remember that you were, I suppose, a little bit conscious about the couple of comments that you'd had or what have you, which is understandable. I wonder if maybe your worry about some of it is almost your own, forgive me for saying, but your own kind of feelings of coming to terms with
for sure
unsealing something like that. Do you know what I mean? And maybe almost like being a bit apprehensive about what the reaction might be because of how you feel about it yourself. But I think you've come on a bit of a journey with that stuff as well, in your own way. And
but it has to be justified. There are sealed items I own that I'm now looking at saying, actually, I won't unseal that. I don't think the benefit of stickering it and photographing it and having that visual resource is worth unsealing this particular specimen. So that's something, and I go out of my way to not find sealed toys. I don't look for sealed toys. It's more modern.
It's same here. As I say, for me, it's really only in the instances where I know that it's only going to be the only way that I can find it in the condition that I might want it, but even then something that's plentiful that, as you said, there's no detriment to opening it, whatever it may be.
So Liam, why didn't you open that Firecon in the end if it was on a wrecked card?
It's because I couldn't bring myself to do it, because it's sealed. There was still that little bit of stigma around it, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. There was just this constant little gnawing voice at the back of your head saying, this has been sealed for all this time. Why should you be the one to open it? And so I'd rather just get rid of it in case somebody else wanted it. But it's incredible now because I regret it, and I really wish I'd kept it and opened it. And it's just, at the time, there was still just that feeling. That was because it would have been quite a few years ago now. So at that point, I was
if
still of
Sixo sent it back to you tomorrow and said you can have it back, would you open
no
it?
pressure.
Yeah.
Would you open it if he sent it back to you tomorrow?
You know
or
what?
do you think you'd have the same feelings? And
No, I think I'd open it. I think in that time, my outlook on these things has changed. I wasn't that big into collecting vintage as much at that point. So I don't know if you remember, but I was always picking up really cheap sort of battered ones because I was quite happy with that. And so it was a very different mentality. Whereas now I would quite happily open it. And it's incredible to think of that stigma. And like you there's some things I wouldn't open, but at the same time, it's amazing that you sort of, like you were saying, you almost were feeling bad about opening it. Like that was running through your head for a moment when that's what this toy was designed to do, was to be opened and taken out and played with, or in your case, photograph it. And it's just incredible that we think of it like that. Not that it's right or wrong.
It's true.
Fascinating. That
I had it
denying the toy what it was built for.
It's true in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
I had it. There was something I forget what it was, quite recently, that I think I posted for sale. Can't remember what it was, and it was a sealed item, vintage. I can't remember what it was, and someone said in reply, "Oh, I'd love to own it, but I couldn't unseal it. I would feel bad about it or whatever." And I was like, "Well, it's really up to you. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you feel bad and you're not going to enjoy it, then fair enough. Of course, leave it. But equally, if you're paying the entry price, really, then it's your experience. And some people, I'm sure, pay that price because they want to unseal that stuff and they want to kind of have that, as you said, that maybe in their mind, the toy is meant to be enjoyed, and they want to have that firsthand. I'm the first person to actually kind of fiddle with this thing, and I don't know. I've mellowed on the whole thing a little bit as well, I must admit, because there is part of me now that also thinks with all of this stuff, it's toys at the end of the day. It's plastic.
But are we being incredibly selfish because we're reaching a certain age, and more than once I've had the feeling of, well, I've probably got less years in the hobby than I've got behind me. So why don't I just do the things that I've got left that I really want? Because we're not leaving as many pristine sealed examples of a finite toy line for people who come later and are interested in that. So in a way, we're kind of having an influence on the future value of toys and
I
the
don't think
availability.
You can, though. Can you do that, really? Can you leave this hobby, in it's not a sustainable hobby at the end of the day in that regard.
Even the toys themselves aren't sustainable.
I was going to say,
toys are falling off bubbles, aren't they? Sealed toys are falling off bubbles or yellowing.
Well, I actually, so one toy I had that was partially sealed. I think the bubble had been slightly open when I got it. Was Backstreet, and I opened it, and actually it was very nice, but the rub sign was ruined. I don't know what it was. There was something wrong with the rub sign, and it was almost like it had powdered inside the bubble, and it had gone all over the toy, and consequently it just looked a mess, honestly. And it was like a real regret of mine. So I ended up picking up one for, I think, like £5 or £10, something like that, and it's immaculate, honestly. And it's one of those moments where you go, I should have just done this to begin with, But it was but I do think that the buying sealed stuff on the times I have done it, which is not that often at all, but it's no guarantee at all of getting a quality product. Actually, stuff can be broken in the box, particularly 30, 40 years on. There's a lot of like Schrodinger's transformers out there.
Right.
You don't know what state they're in. Black Zarak is is a great one, actually. There's a toy like that. I would say definitely. I mean, don't unseal a Black Zarak.
Someone did that at BotCon. Someone bought a sealed Black Zarak. No, unsealed it in front of a crowd of attendees. Proceeded to take it out of the box in front of the group of surrounding fans who had gathered, and he broke it. Just right there. Sealed Black Zarak, opened, first transformation, and it broke.
He's got a hell of a story out of it, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's one that's persistent. But Sixo, don't feel too bad about the Backstreet. If it had a rub sign, it's the 90s Chinese release. And
I know, yeah. No, I know that, and I knew that going in. Don't worry. But it was the Black Zarak, I suppose I use it as an example. So I was going to say, I think it's perfectly possible that there are sealed Black Zaraks out there that may well be broken just on account of how they've been handled, in the box or whatever. I use that as one example. I'm sure there are plenty, but I think it is interesting, this idea of like sealed vintage being, it's only really good as long as it's sealed, I suppose, isn't it? The second you unseal it, and then it's interesting what you're saying about kind of keeping that worth for future generations, because anything loose, as soon as you handle it, you're deteriorating it, really. White plastic, all of that is going to deteriorate. Let's not talk about gold plastic, but even stickers, things like that, chrome, it's all going to wear.
Yeah, the bubbles.
Yeah.
Like G1 hook is positioned on the card in a way that the pointy part of the back of the truck, the hook section, if it rattles around in the bubble, it pierces the bubble. So a sealed hook with a perfect bubble is actually considered quite rare. So there's things like that maybe if you come across a really perfect sealed hook, it's like worth thinking about. Maybe this is of a very finite number. And if I just want a perfect hook, I could find one with a damaged bubble and I'll open that, or whatever the case may be. That's a consideration I like to employ before I ever consider buying or unsealing a toy.
Yeah.
But I have bought quite a number of G1 that are sealed to their backing card. They don't have a box anymore. The box has been damaged or water damaged or hasn't existed for years. Or unused G1 inside the styro. Like the box is gone, but the styro is there. So the toy is actually exposed. And I've used those toys. And that's about as far as I'm comfortable going without any sort of conscious decision about whether this is something I want to do. Because I am, I'm considerate of history and specimens and stuff like that and preservation.
See, I just can't get on board with that. I mean, I can understand it. It's just, you're saying about it being a finite sort of resource almost, and for depriving somebody else. It's just a lot of these things, they're going to end up in, I don't know, in storage and things as well, aren't they? And I don't know. I think personally, I feel a lot better knowing that somebody's enjoyed a toy rather than putting it away. Like I know from myself where I've had sealed stuff and I've ummed and ahed over it so much, I put it in storage, not because I didn't love it, but just because I didn't want to leave it out or do something. So I just put it away. And then it's like, who's getting any enjoyment of that? All it is I own it. And then there's a lot of people, like I say a lot of people, there are people, should I say, that, and it's actually the part of the fandom that I don't like that much or see myself as part of. It's when you sort of see them talking like vintage toys should be almost like considered a protected species almost, by UNICEF or something. And it goes a little bit far. It's like, how are you touching that? Why didn't it? It's still
there are certain toy communities which do exile collectors if they're known to have opened a sealed specimen. Not Transformers, but if you're known to have unsealed a vintage specimen from that toy line, you're basically exiled from the community. And
really?
You're like ostracized. Yeah, no, I've heard that from more than one person.
I get the idea of not wanting to unseal very rare stuff, really particular stuff. I can understand that all the way. But the majority of stuff, if you're buying it, you should enjoy it as you want to. And
I agree with you, yeah.
As mortifying as it might be, seeing somebody open a vintage toy for a moment, there's still then, it's like they've done it because they want to do something with it. And that toy, then now it gets to live its life, and it's, it's being used. And it's just...
Yeah. I don't know if it's a...
shelf.
Can you quantify that though? Like the sealed collector, he keeps it sealed, or he or she keeps it sealed, and they display it in a beautiful sealed museum style collection that many, many people enjoy looking at, versus the person who buys it. And if, not everyone takes photos of their toys and then makes a resource out of it or makes an experience that many people enjoy reading about. And, we can talk till we're blue in the face about, this is the first time I opened it. It's got that smell. And then I opened the baggie and I looked at the catalog, which has never been looked at. And I took the decoder strip out. And then there was this like leaflet for a mail away. And it was so nostalgic and it really took me back. Is someone who's 30 years younger than us going to give a monkeys about that?
No, I don't know if it'll be the same, because ultimately, you're not going to hold something that you didn't grow up with in the same reverence, are you? It's not going to have the same kind of nostalgic feel to it. It's not going to have the same touch points, things like the decoder strip and stuff like that. It's not, you may think it's cool or whatever, but really, only in the same way as like a new thing that you pick up, the latest Studio Series or War for Cybertron or whatever, you're not necessarily going to hold it in the same sphere. So I think it's really interesting. But I do think it's worth acknowledging as well, though, that actually enjoyment is very multifaceted, because, we're talking about enjoying toys like in the traditional sense, that you unseal them and you play with them or whatever. But there are, of course, collectors that get their enjoyment from seeing those sealed specimens, in all their minty glory. And as you sort of said, Maz, those kind of museum-esque displays and things as well. I mean, it's not my bag, but I do kind of admire it in its own way as well. Like, I would never do that, but to see it is kind of impressive. So I guess it's just worth acknowledging.
Like you're saying there about kids opening it and not enjoying it the same way we did, it's just like, at what point do these toys then, still in the package, move on from being just toys that are in a package to antiques that are sold on to people who have no interest in them, but they're just buying them because they're expensive? That's
true.
Not exactly happening now, but that's where it goes, isn't it? So then I think that's where, for me, I'd rather that toy have been taken out, played with, broken and lost, than just end up passed down to some nameless person who just, has it because it's worth something without knowing the history or caring about it.
Yeah. One other consideration. I remember the feeling of coming onto the Transformers fandom for the first time and seeing an unused G1 sticker sheet for the first time since my childhood. And I remember that moment distinctly, and this rush of nostalgia and like, wow, I remember those sticker sheets. And obviously, if we all do what some of us have been doing and using vintage sticker sheets up, if everyone did that, there would be no more vintage sticker sheets. And that feeling for the next person would be lost forever. So that is also a consideration. That's something that has crossed my mind. Even though numerically there's probably enough collectors who don't do that, and enough vintage sticker sheets, and not enough people who still have nostalgia for G1 but have not already engaged with G1 since in their adult lifetimes, for that not to be the case.
Yeah, I get that. It's just
maybe numerically it's not a thing.
Yeah, I suppose thinking about it, though, if they don't open the box, they're not going to see those things anyway. If these things all stay sealed forever, that's what I mean. A lot of these things won't get seen by anybody anyway. It will just continue down, and I think really what I'd like to see is the Natural History Museum get one of every package and put it on display.
Yeah,
and then everyone can go and look at it, and that's it.
Do you know, speaking of that, I don't know if any of you have ever been to the Museum of Childhood in Bethnal Green, I think it is. And they have a Transformers G1 display. And obviously, these museums, they rely on donations. So it's not a particularly good display. And I remember writing to them and saying, I'm happy to give you examples of nice G1 Transformers to display. And but they never got back to me. But I mean, maybe I should just donate anyway. Just send it to them. But
is that something like that. Is that the one with the Grimlock?
Grimlock was in the Natural History Museum.
It was in the that's right.
But even that's not there anymore. I mean,
no, it's gone.
I haven't seen it the last two times I've been. Last time was 2019, but
yeah, I was trying to remember.
I remember seeing that years ago and just being so happy it was there. It was just, it's amazing. You're surrounded by all these dinosaur skeletons, all this amazing stuff, and the oldest thing that you're excited about there is the G1 Grimlock. It's really funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everyone always remembers it. I remember actually going to a toy museum of some description in. Trying to think where we were. My wife and I had gone around a bit of Eastern Europe. I think we may have been in Prague at the time. I'm trying to remember now. And we went to a toy museum, and they had numerous Transformers in there. Not like too many, but some really interesting ones. And that was kind of cool to see them. With some of these very historical, old toys, lots of dolls and things like that as well. But lots of like 1940s stuff, and then Transformers. That was really cool. I'm really trying to think where it was. There's
a museum in the US which has currently got a Unicorn prototype on display, isn't there? That's quite
right.
wonderful.
That's right. Yeah, I did hear that. That's interesting. So
imagine getting to just see that and just being completely unaware of what it is, whereas we're all like, "Oh my god, this is insane! A holy grail."
It is amazing.
Yeah.
Here's one for you. Just kind of going back a step about keeping toys sealed and all of that kind of stuff. What about people that now buy new toys and keep them sealed specifically for, I don't know, for value or for whatever it may be? Because I don't know about you, but I always find it kind of funny. Like I've had a few discussions with a couple of collectors or fans or whatever that are doing this. So they've bought, let's say, the latest Studio series. I think Hot Rod was a good example of like people buying a couple of multiples and they're like, oh, I've bought one to keep it sealed. And I do always kind of get
Liam. I don't know if you can hear me, but I reckon he's talking about us.
I actually wasn't.
Yeah.
I know that both of you have done that.
Don't tell him, Maz, but I'm feeling a bit attacked here.
All right. I know that both of you have that, but forgive me because I think
I sold mine today, actually. As it goes.
Your reasoning for having a sealed one was in case you broke it, right? Like to have a spare.
Well, that says a lot about me, doesn't it?
Can I just point out mine's only sealed because I've been too lazy to open it again.
But like in Maz's case, it seems like a good precaution because we all know his propensity for breaking toys. But
even toys I've sold to other people are now breaking.
It's true.
An Alternators Mirage I sold to someone like 6 years ago has broken, and they're pretty sure it's because it was mine.
It's
That's
delayed
broken.
M.A.S. That's what it is. It's like the whole COVID and long COVID thing. It's just like it's long M.A.S. It's like the delayed after effect. But it's interesting because I do see people doing this now, and I wasn't meaning you guys, but I was meaning people specifically buying those toys to keep, presumably for later value or whatever.
Yeah.
And you do see people doing it as well with, I don't know, toys that are. I'm probably going to sound a bit. I don't know what I'm going to sound like when I say this. Hopefully not bad, but toys that are just not worth very much. Do you know what I mean? And it's interesting because at what rate are they imagining that stuff is going to appreciate to the point where it's actually worth keeping it sealed and taking up space in your house for all of that time? Do you know what I mean? That's what I can never kind of, I suppose, get my head around, because there is, with all of this, even with G1 actually to a certain extent, you know, if you're just doing it from a value perspective of like, oh, it's going to be worth something. I mean, there are better ways to make money. Let's be honest. Do you know what I mean? That's taking up a lot of space in your house for something that actually it's never really going to be worth that much money.
Yeah, it's speculation based on
exactly
recent history. I imagine at the time people may have been a little bit funny about why would someone hold on to a sealed Sam's Club RID Optimus Prime, but that person today is probably going, yeah, look at me now, 20 years later, made $300.
I love how relevant that is to you right now as well.
Don't know what you're talking about. But
check his eBay history.
But that's 20 years. You would have had to hang on to that for 20 years to make a couple of $100s on it.
That's my point. Yeah, and now you may sit there. I mean, if you had one, of course, by happenstance, you would sit there now and think, well, hey, quid's in. That's, you know, that'll, that's a good little payday. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever for a secondhand sale. But the idea of purposely keeping that stuff to then net a profit of some sort, I always just think is kind of mad. It's an interesting one. I'm not knocking it at all. I know some people do it, and some people I'm sure maybe they get a pleasure from it or whatever it is. But I think it's not a quick buck, is it? Let's be honest. And even then, when payday comes, it's like you said, you know what, potentially $200-300 of profit over 20 years. You know, it's man. Yeah.
At the same time, I saw someone selling a sealed Diaclone Big Powered from, what was that, 2017, 2018? For like $650 yesterday. And this is a toy that I sold less than 24 months ago for £200. And that was less than retail.
Yeah. That Diaclone stuff, though, it is mad. It is mad. And the prices of some of that just shooting up, isn't it? But do you know, that's interesting, actually, because that reminds me more of fans' toys. Because, you know, a lot of fans' toys stuff on the aftermarket goes for, I think, ridiculous sums, to be honest.
Their lupus is pretty mad still, isn't it?
Shocking. But if they reissued that tomorrow, which I don't think they will, but if they did, you know, people have been hanging on to that, I'm sure.
Look at the Insecticons.
Well, yeah.
They sell, like, just a couple of months ago, some dude got £1,000.
I think it was like weeks before.
Yeah, it was mere weeks before they reissued
2 weeks, I think it was, something like that. Yes, it was. I saw that sale going, you know, the better part of $1,000 for those 3 Insecticons. You know,
we were all surprised, weren't we? We were like, this can't be happening. Who's paid $1,000 for that?
It happened.
I bet he was running down to the post office just thinking, don't reissue him in this next day. That's it.
But it's unusual, actually, for fans toys to reissue stuff in that way. But I do think that it's interesting because, you know, all of that third-party scene is kind of insane anyway for aftermarket prices or whatever.
Happened with Quakewave, didn't it?
Yeah,
they reissued Quakewave, and then it was like within the time frame that MP Shockwave came out as well.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I apologize.
No, not at all. Because you're right. It's an interesting point as well. But there's been a few examples of this. Lupus is the other obvious one, I think. But there are a couple of their products. You know, so even the Dinobots now as well. You know, have really kind of crept up, and you know, are very desirable. You know, if you were selling them or whatever. But I think all of that is really fascinating. And we're kind of getting into aftermarket now and away from packaging a little bit, I guess. But it's still mad to me to see that stuff going for the prices that it does.
Yeah. So in the case of toys like a fan's toy Stomp, which is a marvelous toy, not a lot of third-party toys have left a lasting impression on me as time has gone, but that one did. See, that toy, if that's sealed, no one is paying a premium for that because of the packaging.
No.
They're paying it because the contents inside are perfect and there's the contents they want. But I wouldn't understand anyone who would buy... Like, I'd need them to explain to me why they would be buying stuff like that and keeping it sealed. Because it's also not a window box. It's
Do people keep third-party sealed, though?
Yes,
people keep,
absolutely. Yes, they do.
Do people
Yeah,
keep
I knew a collector
sealed?
in London who... Yes, absolutely, they do. I remember buying the Make Toys Wrestle, the Grapple Masterpiece scale from a collector in London. Walked to his house, actually, and picked it up. Of course, he didn't let me into his house. He made me stand outside his gate, which was a few meters away from his front door. But that's a whole different story.
It's wise.
But...
He's obviously wise.
Yeah, he saw you coming.
I remember he told me, "Don't call me. Don't call me. Just message me on Facebook.
Delete my number."
Yeah. And he obviously had a weird relationship with his collection and other people. And he always bought one extra of everything he was purchasing. Even like he kept everything sealed, third-party Masterpiece, and it was all, none of it was window box. It was all just the closed box, and it didn't even have box artwork. Really, most of the Masterpiece, it's just like stylized stock photography. So, and I remember he used to keep his own one sealed, and he just happened to have a second one, and I bought my Make Toys Wrestle from him. And I never understood why he was buying that stuff, especially third-party MP, to fill in a gap in the official line, and then to keep that sealed. I didn't really understand what the appeal of that was.
Yeah, I didn't get that. It is a weird one.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it goes to, like you were just saying about people buying sort of new toys that aren't worth much and keeping the second one. I think it's not always with the idea of selling it, though, is it? There's a lot of people will buy multiples, and I think a lot of it is, it's like bottling that same feeling of having the toy still in the box and sealed.
I think maybe you're right, yeah.
And so there's always that experience of it's still there, and it's that... Because like we were talking about earlier, when you go into the shop, it was always exciting seeing them. And there is something to be said sometimes where the idea of getting something is more exciting than till you've actually got it, isn't it? When you've opened a toy sometimes, it's less appealing than you thought it was.
It looks better in the packaging.
Yeah. And it can tell you on something totally different. And so I think a lot of people will collect. So it's even like Siege stuff and War for Cybertron stuff, which you can pick up at bargain places for nothing. But a lot of people will buy multiples just to have that. And then... but then you do see people then will sell it like a year later because they realise they've got no room left or something like that. And it doesn't even go for that much. But the idea wasn't to buy it to speculate fair. As such. But a lot of it, there is also an element, isn't it? It's a lot like comic book buyers used to be, where you'd get all these people to buy number one, even though it's worth absolutely nothing, not realising like number 2 and 3 are the ones that are going to be expensive because they make There's always that element in every sort of collector base where there will be people who buy stuff like that. But I imagine that's the same for third parties as well. People
and
like to have.
I guess you can't. Yeah, and sometimes you can't predict that stuff. That stuff. I mean, actually, talking about comic books, that's a good example. Sometimes it's unpredictable which issues are going to end up becoming valuable and it's sometimes because of an event that happens in the story that isn't significant at the time, but then is in retrospect. But then who would have predicted that Fans Toys Weird Wolf, Lupus, of all of them, would be the one that would, reach megabucks on the aftermarket? Nobody, when that toy was released, I remember reviewing it and people were like, really couldn't give two stuffs about it.
No.
And then
it wasn't that great a toy either, really.
But isn't that often the case though as well, that it's the stuff that people don't pay attention to in the beginning, nobody buys? Yeah, exactly. Anime Astro Train all over again.
There's always an event, isn't it? There's always like something that is unexpected. Like More Than Meets the Eye comic, the retailer incentive of issue 19 with the Nick Roach's cover of the Magnus helmet, the empty Magnus helmet, is by far the most valuable comic cover in that series, because I think it wasn't even like a really crazy rare retailer incentive. I think maybe just people didn't order enough of it, or maybe it was advertised as a 1 in 10, but it was actually a 1 in 50 or something along those lines is the story. But they just didn't get that many in, or people didn't want it. And as a result, as time passes, people struggle then to find it, and it massively exponentially increases in desirability and price. But it's always because of a specific event. And maybe that Lupus is the same thing. People didn't go for it as like, I really want to get in on Fans Toys Headmasters. Like, really? And now,
well, especially
of
as they
course,
haven't even finished the set yet. I mean, we're still waiting on Skull Cruncher at the moment, which is kind of funny. But anyway, I digress.
Bullet fusion mode! Triple power! Will Racer!
We've spoken a lot about G1 packaging and Masterpiece and things like that, but packaging has changed, hasn't it, a lot over the years through the different lines. As you can see, if you go from G1 to Beast Wars, things change there, don't they? You get this things like the blisters get a lot bigger, don't they? Like before, it was reserved a lot for mini bots and things, wasn't it? In G Wars, G Wars, Beast Wars,
G Wars,
Generation Wars. That's basically the fandom, isn't it?
it's the 50-cent Transformer toy line. That is G Wars. But it's changed a lot over the years, hasn't it? So, what have been your some of your favorite experience of packaging for the different toy lines?
I think I didn't see Beast Wars packaging during my collecting time.
Really?
I obviously missed all of 1989, 1990, like Turbo Masters and like stuff like that, Obliterators. And going back and looking at it, I quite like it, even though it doesn't remind me of G1 the way packaging up to 89 or even Gold Box does. I like it. The next time packaging really stood out to me was Car Robots, and that was like it's still dictating what I buy today. We talked about Superfire Convoy. It was because of the packaging evoking something in me. I'll never forget how I felt when I first saw the JRX box, and having now gotten the JRX again, it's probably the best condition JRX I've ever had out of the 4 or 5 I've owned. This is a proper Japanese Car Robots Takara gift set JRX in unused condition. It still even has like the tissue paper over them, and that is the feeling I was looking for. And it's
tissue
everything
paper.
I hoped for. Yeah, tissue paper.
That specific feeling
I was looking for.
Of tissue paper.
Yes, the tissue paper on top meant everything to me. I remember walking into a store in Soho, asking them to get down their JRX for me so I could look at it. This was back in 2000, and I ripped the tissue paper. I wasn't supposed to. I think the guy was really annoyed with me. I didn't think he knew it was on there just to look at the toys. And I was like, no, I'm not going to buy it. It's all right. I just wanted to have a look. I was that guy. But yeah, so Car Robots packaging. And I know that Robots in Disguise are far more affordable. And sometimes the toys are even better looking. And sometimes they're exactly the same.
Better packaging.
Yeah, I want the Car Robots packaging because I love Car Robots packaging. I've never forgotten how God Magnus looks on that box, and it's stayed with me for years, for decades.
It's quite busy, the design of it.
But it's so consistent, and
it's nice.
It's that feeling of, oh my God, Transformers are back from the year 2000 that I connected it to. But I actually really like RID packaging. Like, I love the way the trains look in RID packaging. They're all angled slightly away from you, and I actually think that looks really nice.
They're roomy boxes, actually, like some of those. The trains especially, because obviously the cars and stuff are all on blisters, but the trains are really I was surprised by how big those boxes are for the
and they were carded for Car Robots, weren't they? The trains were carded.
Yeah.
Except for the gift set version. So yeah, I thought RID and Car Robots packaging, both of them actually, I really loved. I really, really liked them. I even remember the carded Spy Changers, the 2 that were sold on the same. I remember buying one of those from Woolworths and just really liking it. I kept my RID Car Brothers packaging for over 15 years before I sold the set, and I sold it with the packaging in the end.
It was an amazing way to combat with that, though, wasn't it? Because it's so G1 evocative, but at the same time, when you look at the cars, they're very similar to Beast Wars in sort of the size, aren't they? With the massive bubbles.
Yeah, that it felt very much like a continuation from Beast Wars packaging, actually. I think, and someone that really did enjoy Beast Wars packaging at the time when it was being released, it felt like a continuation from that for sure. I mean, actually, even stuff like the trains and whatever in the slightly larger boxes, that all is quite evocative of Beast Wars. One thing Beast Wars did, I think, really well was that the packaging was hugely consistent across the different class sizes that they had. So, like, basics were all in bubbles, and actually deluxes as well. But then you had Mega in a particular sort of square size, rectangular box, what have you, and Ultras as well. And it all felt, and then the combiners were in a kind of sort of slightly more flat but tall box. And it all felt really just nicely laid out. Like, I remember seeing it in shops and thinking, this is hugely accessible and like really kind of cool.
So how were they packaged inside the bubbles? Like with G1 bubbles, there's bubble and card. Remove bubble, toy is there. And then like with with some of these carded car robots figures, like from the year 2000, the Car Brothers, you've got the bubble, and then you've got like an insert tray inside the bubble.
It's like a little clamshell almost.
Yeah. Well, so was it difficult with Beast Wars packaging to get to the inner beast?
What a setup!
Oh my god!
Oh my gosh!
You and your inner
Did you
beast.
struggle to access the inner beast?
I don't think I've ever struggled to access my inner beast, honestly.
I was just getting ready to start talking about like the Beast Wars motif and how much I liked it, you know, the eye and stuff, and then I'm like hanging on the edge of my seat listening to M.A.S.K talk. Like, where's he going?
Same. I'm not gonna lie, I was really paying attention and like hanging on to that as well, because I was like, oh man, he's coming up with a really serious question here. I'm gonna look like I'm, you know.
But it is also a serious question. Like, what was the packaging like? Because obviously, I'd never experienced that clamshell packaging inside so I'd missed that entire era of toys.
It was. I think the thing that a lot of people remember about Beast Wars is the kind of like rock style that they've got going on almost. So it's the bubbles and everything.
They were molded specifically, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, and it was very cool. And obviously, Liam's right. It had the eye at the back, which was a real kind of visual memory thing. You know, a lot
it's
of
iconic.
Kind of,
Just say
it is. Yeah. I think I think Beast Wars fans definitely. You know,
I still think it's right up there as amongst the best Transformers packaging ever. And you know me, I'm not even
beautiful.
a big Beast Wars fan, but that logo with the green logo and the raptor eye is so cool.
I love
cool.
it. And I love the Raptor Eye. I love that they've brought it back for Kingdom, but put the arc going through the eye. I think that is exceptionally clever. I don't know, have you seen that?
Yeah.
The
It
way
shows someone's paying attention, doesn't it? It really does.
someone that designed that is a Beast Wars fan. I can tell you. That's not just like someone's randomly gone, hey, that would be cool. That's like there's a love there, which I think is really, really nice in the Kingdom packaging for sure. But yeah, no, it was essentially just bubbles with a little kind of clamshell thing inside. So you know, same old deal really. Nothing too remarkable in that store, but just the packaging itself was very cool to see. And then a lot of like insert trays, card trays inside the larger boxes.
Yeah, and they would have been secured down, similar to how something like a Rotor Storm would have been secured.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of twisty ties and things like that, if memory serves. It's been a while since I've unsealed a vintage Beast Wars item.
I opened one recently, the one that you guys got me, Pterosaur, and I actually can't remember what the inside of it was like. I was so blown away by
If memory serves, we were onto twisty ties at that point, I think. I'm trying to remember now, actually. When twisty ties kind of became really prevalent, anyway.
They were definitely prevalent in Unicron Trilogy, weren't they?
They were, for sure. But Unicron Trilogy, at that point, you start to see a real variance between... I guess it started with car robots, really, because... or I say that, actually, I'm going back further. You know, Beast Wars, I was going to say the variance between Takara and Hasbro. I mean, it's always been there since G1, and we talked about it earlier, but I'm just thinking back through the various lines, and I think that's really interesting in itself, because actually Beast Wars... I wouldn't say it was too different. Like the style of the artwork and everything on the boxes is different, but I think it's when you get to Unicron Trilogy that it starts to get really different in my mind, because a lot of the Unicron Trilogy boxes in Japan are closed window, as in there's no window, whereas actually the Hasbro ones are all open window, and very different style as well. I drastically prefer the Unicron Trilogy Takara packaging. I think it's really quite gorgeous, actually. Really lovely drawn artwork on the front and everything. And the Hasbro packaging is nice, but just for me, there's something truly spectacular about that Unicron Trilogy Takara packaging.
It's almost a shame, isn't it, now, when you think about how Hasbro and Takara have the same packaging. I mean, the Hasbro packaging has really gone up, and it's really nice. It's just sort of a shame that you don't get that contrast anymore. Because everything.
I did see a picture of a totally complete studio series recently, and it actually looked really cool, especially displayed from the side with all of the character artwork on the side. What was confusing, obviously, was that they're all numbered, but then the Studio Series 86, they're all just 86, 86, 86, 86. And they've released enough toys in that line that 86 is a legitimate number that you would expect the toys to have reached by now. There were so many. I didn't realize there were so many Studio Series toys. But that's jumping way ahead, but because you were just talking about modern packaging and the difference between them. But like you're saying, Hasbro have stepped up their packaging game, and I love Studio Series packaging.
It is nice, definitely. So, but I think a lot of the War for Cybertron stuff actually at the moment, the Siege packaging and the Kingdom packaging, as I say, I think is good as a whole. You know, the artwork,
especially the Titan class toys, like the massive artwork on a Scorponok or the Triptychon. You know, that was really, really amazing looking boxes.
And then I guess there's we talked about it briefly earlier, but there is Vinyl Tech as well. The old favorite Vinyl Tech. I mean, we could talk about Vinyl Tech for hours, of course, but let's just talk about the boxes, because I think we talked about it right at the beginning, didn't we? And just said that that's really like collector orientated packaging, which I don't know, felt to me like, looking at everything that had come before it, felt like the first time that we'd really seen that in Transformers. Maybe, I don't know, maybe like all of the previous lines, everything had been more sort of geared towards, not necessarily like geared towards kids, but this was the first one that was geared specifically towards collectors. Would you agree?
Yeah, especially that the cars were on a display stand in the box.
Right.
So that clamshell that came with Vinyl Tech, I found that really easy to deal with. And then, of course, the toys just go straight back into that, and then they can go back into the box. And they did have a twisty tie, but it was just basically one twisty tie. You untwisted it.
Yeah. For most of them. Of them.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
Because some of them have more.
But I thought that was really good packaging. It was perfect for stacking as well, because a vast majority of Vinyl Tech were all the same size until you sort of get to Vinyl Tech Asterisk. But then that was gorgeous. Like the back of that had stunning artwork. And then you had Kiss Players, which was definitely Kiss Players.
The Kiss Players packaging. I mean, obviously people are going to, have their opinions on Kiss Players. And the fiction is pretty
we have to bleep this whole section out.
Let's not go into it.
Let's put a disclaimer, not for people under the age of 36.
Let's not go there. But even the toys, I remember getting those toys in hand for the first time and thinking, wow, this the drawings and things on them is kind of pushing it a bit for me. Do you know what I mean? It was they're weird. Let's put it that way.
And the thing is, they don't even display the toy that well. So they're not even like, oh, that's a shame because the artwork is so nice. That sort of watercolor artwork that they have. And then you think, well, actually, that's not even that nice to display alongside anything. The shape of the boxes was so absolutely weird as well.
Yeah, really
they don't
hard
really
to
fit with anything. Yeah.
No, impossible, and impossible actually to keep nice, the boxes, because of like all the flaps and everything, the way it unfolds. Kind of clever the way that kind of clever the way that the CD is inserted, I think. But even then, as soon as you take it out, the whole thing just kind of falls apart. It was just just a weird one all around. And as I say, the packaging art is not something I would ever display.
No, and let's face it, we were buying that line heavily based on superb vehicle modes, and the vehicle mode wasn't the primary focus of the packaging, so it didn't even sit well with everything else. So while Alternators by Hasbro started off in these massive boxes, you could see the whole vehicle, but it was cavernous around it. And it was really weird, wasn't it? Because you didn't have a plastic window. You had this really big box, and then the first few releases had a plastic window, then the blue boxes, you remember, like Smokescreen up to Hound. And then came the red Alternators boxes, where they were just like, there was this space. It was like a bubble that holds the toy in the middle. Yeah, and then you've got loads of space, and then this sort of like red outer box. And then we went to the worst packaging they had, which was the bubble boxes, which are also rubbish to stack.
They are awful to stack and really hard to, I think as you said earlier, really hard to kind of keep pristine as well, because they just kind of, you've got to rip them basically to get them out.
It was a lot of faff.
Yeah. I will say though, actually, that those bubble boxes, I think, look excellent when they're new. Because you can see the car almost 360 degrees, which is really quite cool. And actually, in terms of, as you said, showing off the alt mode, I think it did it quite well actually in that regard. It's just that everything else about that packaging was a bit less fortunate, maybe. But
and they borrowed from Vinyl Tech, didn't they, with the little circular aperture at the end, at the back of the car. Did. So that was kind of cool. And artwork was a thing. That they got exclusive artwork. Those bubble boxes, even characters who had been previously released got new artwork for those releases. Except in Europe, where it was just a photo of the toy.
That's true. Artwork is kind of a whole thing, though, isn't it? Because I was thinking about it. We haven't really touched on it too much tonight, but I was thinking how interesting actually the kind of evolution of the artwork is. I mean, obviously, you guys, both know that I do the old box art polls and everything on Twitter, and there's been, lots of focus on G1 in that, which is
I vote in them sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
as
same.
you should do. As you
Definitely.
should do. It's all kicking off at the moment with in 1989. But there's a lot of focus on G1, obviously, in that. But what I do love is seeing the kind of evolution of box art to a point, and then obviously it kind of goes through Beast Wars, which was excellent, the box art, I think. And then Beast Machines was just literally a picture of Cheetor from the cartoon. And I think that Beast Machines packaging, for me, just was so naff just because of that, just because they put no effort in with the artwork or anything. It was just so generic.
It's very pound stretcher packaging, isn't it? It's got that kind of cheap toy you'd find in there sort of vibe.
It really is. And I think I remember it being a big deal actually at the time for the internet presence that I did have at the time, which was not much, but some kind of time on the internet reading about this stuff, not much. But I remember it being a big thing, and seeing pictures of some of the toys and the packaging on, people like Ben Yee that were sharing lots of pictures of it at the time, and would check out his site and things like that. It was, it felt like a come down, even at the age that I was, and with sort of probably not that much focus on the boxes and things. It did feel like, oh, this is a real major step backwards. And I think it's unfortunate with Beast Machines that, I actually quite like Beast Machines, and I'll stick up for it at the best of times. But it did feel, that was one element amongst a few that felt like a step backwards from Beast Wars, which was a bit of a shame.
Yeah, it's as we were talking about earlier. The packaging on Beast Wars was so fantastic and just brilliant to look at. Yeah. Even not being a big fan of Beast Wars, I could really step back and appreciate it. But Beast Machines, every time I saw it, it was that first time where I was like, oh no, it's not really Transformers for me. This, I mean, that was Beast Machines in general, but the packaging had that, just like you said, NAF was a great descriptor of it. But just what you were saying about Binaltech a minute ago about it being like the earliest sort of examples of collector packaging. It's amazing when you think back to that time, because we were talking about in the Binaltech episode, but it really is when people start to focus on collectors, isn't it? Because this is where you also start getting the G1 book boxes, isn't it?
They were earlier, I think. They were earlier.
Slightly earlier, but it's that same era, isn't it? It's that same couple of years.
Commemorative G1 Hasbro packaging in Toys R Us would have been 2001, 2002. And that was already featuring like Pat Lee style Dreamwave artwork on the boxes. And but it's funny how you were getting magazine adverts with the same style of artwork and the same orange background saying things like, oh, what was the jazz advert I had? Like, your mum threw this out, or your mum gave this away in a second, but now you can own it again, or something like that. I actually have that ad somewhere around here. But
do you?
I do have it, yeah.
But M.A.S.K collects ads.
I do collect ads. It's true. He does. Vintage ads, yeah, I do. They're cool.
You would love some of the ads. I'm sure you've seen some of them. I know you have seen some of them actually that they did in the Marvel UK comic. Because they had some amazing like Target Master adverts, Headmasters. I believe
I have that one actually. Yeah, they are really cool.
I seem to recall us discussing. I think it was the Target Master one, but yeah, they had bespoke artwork on those, a lot of them, and they were really nicely drawn. I don't know who the artists were and what have you. It didn't seem to be the same artists that were doing the regular comic.
Those are my strongest memories of the comic, as a kid. Are those drawn adverts to the toys.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Even the it was like they tried to recreate the catalog. Like the sort of, I'm sure you've both got the image burnt in your brain. The picture of the catalog where you've got Hot Rod and Cup and all of those guys lined up in toy form. They'd almost like drawn them really small, the toys in both modes and things like that for some of the adverts and things. It was very, very cool. But it was like a real style unto itself, away from the packaging and things like that at the time. So quite interesting.
I think it's the Slugslinger versus Point Blank one. I remember the best.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good one.
So then we've got Masterpiece, haven't we? We said a little bit about reissues earlier. We talked about the collector's edition packaging, and we've talked about the book boxes a little bit now, and the commemorative series.
Can we just mention the little booklets that come with the book box editions? The
ones you can rip out. Absolutely, that's right. And then obviously, like Convoy Prime came with the binder, didn't it? That you could put them all in.
Yeah, and I think that was the first time I ever felt like I was being catered to, as an adult,
Right.
rather than because the Hasbro reissues were they had a nice little box and everything, but that was it, wasn't it? But here it had all this information and stuff. But even because a lot of it's in Japanese, so you couldn't read it, but it was like looking at the picture of the cartoon, all of these things,
Yes.
and it felt very targeted, didn't it? It was done so well.
It felt a bit more coherent than anything we'd had before. Like it's acknowledging comic. Maybe comic. It's acknowledging vintage toy, acknowledging cartoon, and now what you're getting is reissue. It was sort of like, you're at the age where you will appreciate this, and we are acknowledging your history with these toys now.
It was very clearly laid out that this isn't like a child's toy anymore. Almost, it's kind of the way that whole packaging and presentation felt compared to like the Hasbro one, which was still on toy shelves in Toys R Us, whereas the Takara ones really felt different.
They even had like a little stand, didn't they, inside the box?
Yeah.
It was kind of you could unfold it and make a little stand, which I'm sure no one apart from M.A.S. ever did. But
that's right. I did it for skids and skids only. My first experience of one of those.
I knew you would have done it with one of them. But
I was doing reviews. I was doing reviews at that point for TF1.com, and it was like I needed to photograph because it was still a time when people would not touch stuff. You'd buy mint in box unused G1, and it would stay mint in box unused. People didn't. It probably hasn't been enough time since the vintage era for people to need to experience that stuff. They just wanted lovely versions of their childhood toys which weren't wrecked. Yeah. So people weren't taking out those stands and assembling them. They weren't looking for that new experience. So it was quite cool to demonstrate that. Whereas now it's much more common, isn't it? Like people will take vintage toys and put stickers on. They will use all of the papercraft stuff that might come with a release, like all the War for Cybertron stuff and the Prime Trilogy stuff that had funky stuff on the inner packaging. You might have to use a black light to see it, or there's a code that you go on the website. And so that's much more common now. But yeah, back then, you're right. I don't remember anyone else getting that stand out of those. Because it was a faff, wasn't it? With all those cardboard pegs. Yeah, it was a faff.
It was one of those. It's nice to know that you could do it, even if you didn't want to. So it was appreciated, even though I never actually did it myself. But I'm pleased to hear that you took some delight in it. So yeah, that's good. And then, as you say, I guess Masterpiece is the other obvious collector-orientated line. But also, the thing that I always think of with Masterpiece packaging, more than anything, is two things actually. Number one, that it's, I guess, the most consistent packaging of any Transformers line.
Hugely so, right? 18 years of the same design, basically.
But not even, I would say, obviously the actual time span of the line as well, which is incredible now.
Yeah.
But even the fact that, obviously there haven't been that many releases, in such a long time, but even the fact if you truncated that line and just released it in normal waves or whatever you did, the fact that there's been no running changes to how the packaging is designed, it's remarkably consistent in terms of the outer design. The only variances are for things like Beast Wars, where they drop in those characters, for example, and they put the eye on it or whatever. But even then, it still adheres to the same general design philosophy. The back of the boxes, the way that the photos are laid out, things like that, is all extraordinarily specific and has been so since 2003 or whatever it is. And I think it's just quite incredible, really, that they've done that. The other thing that I was going to say about Masterpiece packaging that I really appreciate, and it comes back to what I said about the collector's edition packaging earlier, is that it stacks beautifully. And that, for example, there is no greater thrill for me, packaging wise, I'm going to sound really sad now, but hey, than seeing all of the Masterpiece cardboard boxes stacked up on their sides. When you've got the picture of the artwork. Incredible, just absolutely really cool. Incredible sight. And we talked in a previous episode about how when we're talking about completionism, about how I'd had a little bit of a, not like a dilemma, but a thing about should I sell some of my older carbots or not. And bizarrely, I know it sounds mad, but probably one of the things that was kind of, if anything, I just thought about this, but kind of, I suppose, encouraging me to keep hold of them was the idea of having all of those carbots on display in the boxes like that, because I don't keep all of my packaging. But
completely understand that.
Really something. Really, really
I remember being annoyed that Tiger Track and Loud Pedal had black and white versions of those on the side instead of actually showing the yellow Lambo from the side. I thought, well, Yeah, okay. There's a way of distinguishing these as show exclusives for a particular event, but
Yeah,
because it was the
Silver Streak
Tokyo.
too.
Yeah, such a shame. I think they would have just added to the whole mural of it. But no, I love displaying those boxes from the side like that. That's true. But some of them were hugely cavernous, weren't they? Like that Soundwave box or the Starscream Coronation version.
Yeah, actually, the real kickers are not even. I mean, Starscream, yes, and Sunstorm, but the other repaints, so Thundercracker and Skywarp, are ridiculous because they're the same size.
They don't even have the gubbins.
Box. Yeah. They don't have the cape or any of that. Yeah. So no coronation gear. But all they did was slap the toy in robot. I mean, Skywarp at least comes with a little Megatron gun. Thundercracker, who is just ridiculous. I mean, actually, I boxed mine up just the other day. I'm selling it on, believe it or not. How sad is that? But he's just literally in robot mode in this massive clamshell in the middle of a gigantic box. And I must admit, when I looked at all 4 Seeker boxes together, not to mention then Dirge, Thrust, and Ramjet, 7 of them, they're all the same size. That is a huge amount of real estate taken up in anybody's collecting space.
Didn't they stop coming with the stands as well for the Takara ones at some point?
Yeah,
they did.
Because I remember I was using the Hasbro ones and buying spare ones of people who had Hasbro Masterpiece jets, so I could have a stand for the Takara ones.
The original Seekers, the original trio, so MP3, 6, and 7, have the stands. The others, the MP11 molds, don't. The Hasbro versions.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, the MP11 Hasbros, like Acid Storm and Sunstorm, came with a stand, and the Thundercracker, the Hasbro Thundercracker.
But not even MP11 has a stand. Just the coronation gear.
Yeah.
And stuff.
So do you think it's a good thing that for 18 years Masterpiece hasn't really done anything interesting with its packaging? I thought it was interesting to start with because it looked sophisticated compared to most Transformers child-aimed art and packaging. But this was all black, and it was almost like a lot of toy lines had a Masterpiece level product. And this was now Transformers' turn to do Masterpiece echelon product. And yeah, it was really, really stylish. You know, you had it wasn't artwork, it was the stock photography of the toy, front and center, no window. Yeah. But now we're like 18 years later, and it's just like, I'm beginning to understand why packaging goes through evolution within a certain line. For some lines, I think it happened too fast and far too much. For example, Vinyl Tech, I think they just made too many changes for too small a line. G1, I think, was, that changed a lot, which kind of can make a multi-year display, a little bit higgledy-piggledy looking, especially towards the end. And went silver, gold, all sorts, But Masterpiece doesn't change at all. I don't know. Do you, as a Masterpiece collector, like that it hasn't changed at all?
Yeah, I guess there's pros and cons to it, isn't there? Because I guess my default answer would be yes, I do like it because I like the consistency and the fact that they can stack so neatly. I like, for example, and this is really sad, but I like, I've got downstairs, I've got stored away, all the various Convoy boxes, for example. But I like that, Rodimus Convoy and various others are all in same size boxes as well. So I like that they've almost got like class sizes of boxes, if that sort of makes sense. And then things like Beast Wars Optimus Primal is the same box same exact dimensions as Inferno and Grapple, for example. Right. So I like that sort of little crossover. All of that I think is very cool, and I do like it when they mix it up slightly for things like Beast Wars. So yes, I would say in theory I do. I suppose in practice, and being brutally honest, there is an element now. I'm just looking at a couple of the boxes that I've got packed up ready to sell, those Seekers. And yeah, there is a bit of same old about it. I would see what you're saying.
There's nothing to look forward to with Masterpiece packaging anymore, is there?
I guess you know what you're going to get, don't you? You know what it's going to look like. I mean, what was the last Masterpiece toy that I got? I guess it was probably RC, I guess, or would have been one of the more
Spin
recent
Out, right?
ones. Maybe, yes, probably Spin Out, actually. Probably Spin Out. Actually, Spin Out's probably a good example because I was super excited for Spin Out, but you're right, I didn't really give the box much consideration because, particularly already having Sunstreaker and Corden, well, you know
right.
you know what it's going to look like, right?
If you look at collector's edition reissues, they were all size-based as well. All of the G1 jets had the same size box, but at least when it came to Ghost Starscream, the box was light blue. And if you think about Clear Hot Rod, it was all the same dimensions, same layout and design, but it was a lovely crystal blue. I mean, surely Masterpiece could just do that at least.
I'll give you a good example, actually, which backs up your argument. Tiger Track. Because the and I'm not talking Masterpiece, I'm talking the G1.
The mail away style.
The mail away box, which is beautiful. I think stunning.
So beautiful.
Completely unique, one-off box in exactly the same size and proportions as the collector's edition packaging. So it stacks nicely with the rest of them, but you always spot it on the shelf. You know exactly where it is, and it looks great and just a real treat. So maybe that's the answer with Masterpiece, is not to kind of completely change it a la Vinyl Tech and do something new for all of them, but just occasionally for like a special toy, whatever it might be, to mix it up a little bit more than they do.
Right. How nice would it have been for them to do that for Star Saber, to have Master Force style pattern, but same dimensions or something like that. Yeah, I think that would be great to see.
That would have been Star Saber's a brilliant example, particularly as it felt like, and still does, a bit of a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely could have done something with that. It's weird then to me, actually, that the movie Masterpiece stuff is the boxes are so different, and actually they're the only Masterpiece boxes that I recycle, because I kept them for a long time, and then I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Megatron, actually. It was Megatron when I got him, and I just realised actually the boxes are not the same cardboard. I know nothing about cardboard, but I can tell you that cardboard was not as good quality, and the printing is not as good, and just generally, and obviously they're just like clamshell with not twisty ties, but those little plastic
the tags.
Tags, you pull them and they snap. It's just that inside, so it doesn't have the same collector orientated feel to it. None of it. It feels like, hey, this is a toy and this is just the box that it comes in. So in the end, I was like, I don't need to keep these. I'm going to recycle them. And it obviously saved a ton of space, so that was good. But it's interesting to me that Movie Masterpiece kind of goes its own route, and doesn't follow the same trend.
I'm going to be controversial and say I like the Masterpiece boxes all around the sides and the back, but I really don't like the fronts. I just find them really boring.
I think you're right. I'm well over it.
I don't think I've ever opened a box and when I've received a Masterpiece and been excited when I see the cover. Whereas with most, I'm like looking at the artwork and I'm like desperate to open it. With Masterpiece, I look at it and go, at least the toy's going to be better, because they just seem to pick really dull sort of poses for them as well. Like the presentation on the back is fantastic. All the embossed logos around the side is great, but the art, like you were saying about Star Saber with the Master Force, it's like they could have done something way more exciting than just have a robot pretty much just standing there with a jet. And it's just showing you the toy. It's not. I suppose it doesn't have to sell you on the toy, because it's not. For most of us, it's not on the shelf, is it? And you're not picking it off and buying it based on that. But it really doesn't sell the toy at all to you.
It's funny seeing people who buy them from Asia, where they sometimes go to airports or sometimes stores in Asia, and Toys R Us in Asia, where Masterpiece is on shelves. Like Takara Masterpiece. That's always quite a sight to see that.
Supermarkets in Australia as well. That was always a funny one.
Right.
Some of them showed up there at like convenience stores.
I guess what backs up your point a bit, Liam, as well, is that actually, I was just thinking about this earlier, with it's part of the packaging, but the instructions and things that used to be in the box, less so now, but particularly with the early toys like MP1 and all of that.
Just thought something. MP what? King Grimlock.
Right, yeah, that's true, actually.
Incredible box.
How amazing is that?
See, that's a good example of a
more of
edition.
that, please.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, because again, the same size as MP8, obviously, but beautifully done, the box and everything. So that was a great special edition. I guess that's exactly what we were saying before. But anyway, just going back a step to what I say, do you remember the instructions for like MP1 and everything? They had all of the pictures from the cartoon. It was like full color booklet,
right.
And it was lots of explanation about like, okay, so we included this accessory, this is what it's referencing, and of course it was all in Japanese, so I didn't know what it was saying, but you could work it out from the pictures. There was enough of a story there. But also they had, and this happened till relatively recently, because I remember it with Soundwave especially, on the back of the instructions they had pictures of all of the different toys. All of the different like toys of that character. So with Soundwave, they even had like the GoBot from G2 and stuff like that, and like obviously the original, all the various different Soundwave toys. And they did that with Convoy. I know they did that with Megatron, the original MP5, Starscream, and that was great. And actually, I'm just thinking now that sort of celebration almost is kind of what Masterpiece is about in many regards, or certainly used to be. And wouldn't it be nice if there was something a la that on the box itself? Maybe, I don't know whether that's on the front, the back, whatever it might be. You could almost have some really cool kind of character artwork that draws from different sources, something like that. I don't know.
I think that's a big part of it, though, because you're kind of conditioned from Generation 1 in pretty much every toy line. They've got really cool artwork of the characters posed in certain ways and something like that. Whereas Masterpiece doesn't have that. You know what I mean? It kind of...
Didn't they start trying a little bit? For example, I remember Sunstreaker and Artfire, the stock photo on the front of those Masterpiece boxes was a little bit more dynamic, wasn't it? In a sort of callback to the G1 artwork for those characters. Or am I imagining that?
No, you're right. Particularly those two, actually, and Sunstreaker, and Artfire. Actually, I think they're both sort of almost direct takes on their original packaging artwork, but done with the toy. Because Sunstreaker's kind of got that feet in the back, kind of leaping forward, sort of forced perspective look to it, almost, which is very cool. And that's a good shout.
And it's funny because they changed the style of the collector's cards. And then suddenly they didn't look the same as before. And that was such a weird decision, considering everything else stayed consistent. Thought, well, if there's one thing you needed it to stay the same, it's the Poxy collector's cards. But
I think it was around Delta Magnus that they did that, give or take. And I remember people being a bit narked about it, needless to say. Like, well, I've collected this line for 15 years or whatever it was at the time, probably not quite that long at that time, but and now you've changed the cards. And I can kind of get why people. I'm not fussed about collector's cards, but I can understand why people would be annoyed about that.
Could be worse. Could have changed the numbers.
Yeah. Here we go.
Wow. Yeah. But actually, it's part of the packaging, obviously, and those numbers, I know we've talked about it a lot in a previous episode.
I was actually listening to our conversation about it today, and I came up with a theory, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go on. Well, I was going to say, my theory is that someone is just mucking around. I think genuinely someone at Takara is just going, lol, do you know what I mean? What number should we make this one now? Look at all the nerds on the internet going crazy, trying to work it out.
Ultimate troll.
Exactly. Having a bit of a laugh. Because there can be no rhyme or reason where Spin Out and Cordon,
I did think of one, though. I did think of a reason. So
on, hit me.
Every time they do a repaint of a toy, if the repaint is just a straight repaint with no remolding to the body, like I was thinking like Road Rage was 26 because there was remolding to the body. Cordon was a remold of Sunstreaker because it got a new head, so it's got its own number, whereas Spin Out was just a repaint of Cordon.
I've read
Exhaust had a new head, so that got its own number.
Yeah, I've read.
But then Delta Magnus didn't get anything, did it?
No, exactly.
Well, no, so that was just a straight repaint.
Yeah.
Different face.
There was a remolded face in the box, and I guess you did have the new little human characters as well. I think it came with Melissa. What's her name? Marissa Fairborn.
Yeah.
And Marissa Fairborn. Yeah.
It's stretching though, isn't it? It's a real stretch. It's
a stretch. I mean, it did have a slightly remolded face. The stock face was the same, but it came with an alternate face that was slightly different. I think it had the.
In fact, actually, the faces it came for were for Magnus, not for Delta Magnus, for Ultra Magnus. So it just
they were.
That's not going to be it then.
I remember someone positing this theory. I remember this is one of the many theories that I have read about Masterpiece numbering and why it is the way it is, and someone had said that, but then there was at least one example that was like, well, hang on a minute, how does that work then? I think the other one was MP40 Target Master Hot Rodimus, which is that a new mold because of the Target Master? Maybe, I don't know, but that again seems like a little bit tenuous.
Yeah, it's reaching. I don't think there's anything that you can nail down 100% with a formula.
I think honestly, maybe it is that, I don't know, but I'm sure there was at least one or two that disproved it slightly. But I would say that the numbering is actually a big part, I think, of the enjoyment for packaging for a lot of people anyway. Like, I mean, if we go back to the book box packaging, Takara collection, that, again, the numbers on that was kind of enticing, wasn't it? Like, lining them up in order and all of that kind of clobber. That's, a bit of fun.
And mostly the same size.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, very... and nice and colourful, actually. I think the colours and the artwork on that mean that it was never boring. And they all look really good. That's a packaging that I struggle to let go of, I must admit. I've got a stack of them.
Yeah, and there's always a market for those if you sell them, I think.
I'm tempted to. I might have to sell them because I just don't know that I've got the room to keep them. But I can't, I mean, I would never. I couldn't bring myself to recycle them. But I do. I mean, that's an interesting topic by itself because I do sell a lot of packaging actually. I mean, I know we're going to come on to it in a bit as well, but I do sell a lot of packaging because, as I said earlier, I figure that if I can't make room for it, even though I might want it, maybe somebody else does, and it does. It often goes. I just sold today actually a Galaxy Force Convoy box, which is really nice, and I love it, but it's massive, and I've just got nowhere to put it really. So it's gone. It's been sold. So why not?
In the beginning came the beasts, but nature lies. They're robots in disguise.
Just on the subject of packaging and recent packaging, what did you guys think of the Titans Return packaging? Because the Hasbro versions really focused on just the headmaster, didn't they? So you had the headmaster fusing with the transdector or the body, or whatever you want to call it, and obviously everyone in that line was basically a headmaster. So I remember that the artwork they did for that was really appreciated. I thought they looked really nice in the boxes.
They've been really raising the game on that front. Like the Titans Return one were nice, and it's that art that you were referencing there. They had that for all of them, didn't they? It was that same pose with the head sort of like it was attaching, and that was pretty cool. But they've ever since then, it's just got better and better for each of the toy lines. Like the current generation stuff, it just looks brilliant.
Yeah, Commander Rodimus Prime for Kingdom has insanely nice artwork.
Yeah, and
it's good.
Like those the Tetrajet Seekers they did a Skywarp, and he was in a special box set with a couple of different little target masters, and that art is amazing of him just sort of dropping down. And they've definitely been raising the game. They started selling T-shirts as well, haven't they, of it, and posters and jigsaws.
Wow.
Have they?
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw a really interesting post by Marcelo Materi, the Hasbro and IDW artist, and he was saying on Twitter that Hasbro is one of the only companies that doesn't publish the name of the box artist on the packaging. And he was lamenting the fact that like loads of other toy lines do that, loads of other manufacturers, but Transformers don't.
And I guess never have done.
Well,
That's interesting. They probably should.
I've never thought about it though. Don't think I've ever seen it on other packaging, but it's because I haven't looked. But
I mean, the only Transformers-related example I can think of, and it was Takara, was Europe's Juice Diaclone packaging, because that was all. They did a comic for that line, and it was done in a really stylized way. And like, if you remember I don't know if any of you have ever seen the Juice Diaclone Optimus Prime Battle Convoy artwork. Like the whole one side of that box, the desert scene with the truck, and then him with the gun. If you look in the corner of all of those Juice Diaclone packages, it says PG Brizzi, which is Paul and Gaetan Brizzi, the twins who did that artwork and wrote that comic. And they are very, very well-established artists. They did Disney's Fantasia. They've done, I think it was Baba, the elephant. They were animators on that. So they have a gallery in France that's so well-known. But their names always appeared on Diaclone packaging, the Juice Diaclone. That's the only example I can think of related to Transformers.
I guess it's a weird one, isn't it? Because I suppose on the flip side, you could say, well, the people or person or whoever that designs the toy, their name is not written anywhere on it. Do you know what I mean? Nor are the many other people involved, but particularly the designer of the toy might be the one that you might think, well, do they get credit as well? But there is, to be fair, also more of a custom, isn't there, around artists, particularly pencil artists, colorists, all of that getting credit as well. So I don't know really. I can see the argument for it. I got to say, even just like a little thing somewhere. But I guess I also kind of understand why maybe it doesn't happen. I don't know, just because it's toy packaging and.
But it must feel weird in the industry if you work for one of the only companies of an enormous franchise and IP where all the competitors and contemporaries are doing it, but you're not getting that credit for Transformers. It must feel strange.
100%. Like Liam, I've never really noticed it being done, but certainly if that is the norm now, then yeah, they should be doing it for sure.
It's making me want to go check those Master of the Universe packaging now.
I was just wondering about that actually, yeah, and because they're so beautiful, you would almost expect that to have an acknowledgement, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder where on those packaging it would be though. Is it some sort of like, in the trademark info at the bottom corner or something on the back? Is it all down there? Because I don't know.
Either that, or I guess like a little, like on a comic cover, just a little signature from the artist or something in the art itself.
Oh, I think Vintage Macross has it as well. I'm thinking of my Vintage Strike Valkyrie box. The it looks like Jetfire, but it's got like a massive cannon on its shoulder. But it is the Jetfire toy with a massive cannon and like a gift set size box with armor. That has incredible artwork, and I do believe the name of the artist, the Japanese artist, is on that box from 1985. So yeah, even in the vintage era, some Japanese-based robot packaging would have had the name of the artist on it. It's not uncommon.
Maybe it's just more of a thing then because let's be fair, a lot of toy packaging, the art is done by people that aren't household names or aren't known. Yeah. So maybe that's where it doesn't happen. Maybe it's more of a common thing for known artists. If they're going to get actual comic book artists or whatever it may be in, then it sort of makes more sense to name them, doesn't it? But you would think actually that it would be more of a draw to name them in that regard, because then for people that know about that and care, it's going to be more of an interest point, isn't it?
Yeah, especially as Hasbro have been going to a lot of the same people year on year, and also their comics are typically illustrated by the same people. I mean, I absolutely treasure the Alternators artwork that I have from Guido and Marcelo. They are treasures. And I love that those are the people who are responsible for the artwork on the boxes for those toys.
Yeah,
and I'm getting an Alternators Mirage at the end of this month, a sealed one, and I'm just a little bit disappointed that the version I'm getting is a European version with a picture of the toy on the box, because I've long since sold my original Alternators Mirage. But knowing that I have the original art and I can see the art on the box as well, would have been cool to experience that again. But
be nice to pair those up, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I've done it in the past.
I am going to make you a little offer because I'm so nice. But I may also have an Alternators Mirage on the way. Shock, I know, shock. But
it's the first time you can own it, isn't it?
I believe that mine may have the artwork.
Lovely.
No, I used to own it. Mirage.
Oh, you did have it? Okay.
I've had it before. I love it. Yeah. I named it as my favourite mold in the Vinyl Tech episode.
Oh, I thought you had only had the Rodimus.
No, I never had the clear Mirage, but I had.
And there's another example of same dimension packaging as every other toy in the line, but extraordinarily special artwork, mail-away style artwork on BT-18 Electro Disruptor Ligier. What another fantastic example of a one-off.
So I've just checked as we're talking, and indeed, my Alternators Mirage that's on the way is the version with the artwork on it. Would you like the box?
I think to save on postage, let's just do the insert that sits in the box. But that's really kind of you. Thank you.
I think I may have something to send to you anyway. Do I not? I don't know. I can't
quite possibly, yeah.
I don't know. Typically, that I do at any given stage. So
I think it's a pack of Jolly Ranchers, isn't it, or something that looks like a pack of Jolly Ranchers?
I think you would pack of Jolly Ranchers if you want. There we go.
Actually, please do get me a pack of Jolly Ranchers and stick it in the. That'd be great.
Remind me later.
Or Monster Munch. You choose.
I've got Monster Munch at home. I can stick you a pack of those in the post right now. Do you know what I mean? I got. Is it cheese and onion or? There's one pack of Monster Munch I don't like.
Pickled onion.
They don't do
onion. Pickled onion are the best. What are you
they are the best. They're the best.
They're the worst one. Pickled onion are the worst flavour.
No, come on. What are you, a flaming hot guy?
Believe that?
No, I have a strange allergy to pickled onion flavoured crisps. It makes my head itch. I don't know what it is. It's always the same. That's the only flavour.
I'm sorry. We cannot run a podcast. I mean, maybe this will get edited out. I don't know, but
it's
we've
not
got to acknowledge right
Don't
here
worry about that.
But there's no way that we can run a podcast and have people saying that pickled onion Monster Munch is not good. That's just it's unacceptable.
We live in a world where we have flaming hot. Why would you even reduce yourself to pickled onion?
Because pickled onion exists. Yeah, exactly.
Museum.
Cut him out there. That's terrible.
Pickled onion.
Anyway, I'll happily send you some Monster Munch or whatever.
Hooray! Monster Munch and Alternators Mirage artwork. What a box!
You can have my Alternators Mirage box for sure. But I
love you, mate. Love you.
Yeah, I'll just have to do without that one box maybe in my collection, but that's fine. Right. So it'll make you happy. So it'll make me happy.
Tremendous.
But they are lovely boxes and they are lovely artwork for sure. And then what I guess kind of just coming back to Masterpiece and all of that kind of era. I guess I was going to mention third-party boxes briefly and say that actually there are some incredible third-party. Think what you will about the whole third-party scene and all of that. There are some incredible boxes and some incredible packaging out there as well, and some incredible artwork. Actually, I mean, even
that's right.
The boxes, Fans Toys boxes themselves are a little bit generic, just like black square.
Some of my least favorite, actually.
But the artwork on the front typically is pretty good. It's in some cases I think insanely good. So I think all credit to it's a fan. It's a community fan that does a lot of the art. I think they've had a couple of people doing it now, but that's typically excellent, I think. And there's a lot of other third parties where they've put huge amounts of effort in. It's not all good, and there are some bad ones, but there are some excellent examples as well. Even stuff like it's always interesting to me. I think, as we said earlier, where third party tries to imitate old style packaging. So like X Transbots recently have done some G1, very heavily G1 style packaging. They did some Stunticons in G1 toy style, and the packaging is immense. And certainly I got a huge thrill out of seeing it, even knowing it's a reproduction, and it's still great to see.
MMC are pretty good at that too.
They are,
Ocular Max
boxes.
Yeah,
I think that's my favorite third party.
They're superb. They're so beautiful,
lovely.
those boxes. Lovely mix of references. And have you noticed all those Legends class ones that are actually going as far as doing Diaclone style boxes?
Yeah.
I remember there's a 3-pack of Seekers of Coneheads, and they've done like Diaclone jet packaging for those. Did you like the reformatted series MMC packaging? I always really liked them for Feral Rex. I mean, I thought they looked great, those boxes.
Yeah, they did look cool. I liked that they had a kind of theme to them and all of that. I did like that. Actually, the one that has blown my mind in more recent memory was TFC Toys ST Commander, which we were talking about not on the pod just the other day, weren't we? But it's a hell of a toy anyway. But the box is immense. It's got this kind of very kind of classic drawn style to it, and it's lovely. And it looks like a scale model box, with the kind of drawn picture on the front on a white background, almost quite precision sort of artwork. It's really, really nice. And again, it's a good example of them kind of leaning into the style of the toy and producing something that's very much a love letter. And I think what you do get with third parties sometimes, interestingly, is that they're freed from all of that kind of corporate branding and all of that. And they can, when they want to be, just be super creative with it. And I think it's really great to see sometimes.
I love that about the TFC G.I. Joe style toy, because it reminds me of when we were talking about M.A.S.K earlier, is if you remember the Boulder Hill box was this massive box and it had the beautiful art on the front, but the sides and the back were plain white with just like this sort of blue line art almost of like what's in it and stuff like that. And that's what that box reminds me of, because that's what a lot of toys were like in the 80s. I think you sort of we forget that, because you remember the front of the boxes, like the Master Universe art, the Transformers ones, but there were a lot where they were just plain, for very particularly for larger toys as well, weren't they, with this sort of cheap art. But I assume it's just to reduce cost or something, but it's very, I don't know, iconic of the time, I suppose.
I've got to say, I quite like the Fans Project Function toys had really cool boxes. No artwork really, no color, but they were just sort of tall cuboids, really standout colors like cyan or gray and brown, and then yellow for Weird Wolf. And those first Function X Headmasters, placing those boxes together, they always look really, really classy. And I really like those boxes, even though they don't have all the same elements that I love in other Transformers packaging, like really standout box art or a window where you can view the toy. But it was just like a nice alternate take on how to package a toy, a collector's toy.
Yeah, that is nice.
You can't talk about Fans Project and not talk about the Combiner. You remember that the boxes they did for, I can't remember what it's called. I think you have it, Maz. The retro style Combiner. It was made to like a G1 toy.
Glacial Bots.
Glacial
Lord. Yeah, that's the one. And but the box art is all done like it was a vintage box found in a container, wasn't it?
Really nice. I really enjoyed that. I never owned it, but I always appreciated it. Really, really nice.
No, we know someone that has it. We bought it for their birthday actually, but really looks cool. I've never handled it, but it looks immense. Has to be said. I was just going to say, actually, I've just thought of this because it's here with me. But I just had a recent thrill, a first for me, with Make Toys, was that I did some photography for the box, and that actually was a real thrill. Seeing the box come through and seeing my photos on it.
Yeah.
It's a very weird feeling. Very weird feeling. They don't. Yeah. I mean, I recognize the photos obviously because I took them, but it still doesn't really feel like mine. And it's my wife was kind of insanely proud of the whole thing, which was quite nice. So definite thrill there.
Will you be signing those at TFN?
What was that, Liam?
Will you be signing those at TFN next year?
I don't think anybody's going to be asking for that. Let's put it that way. But
you never know. No, you might be surprised. You might be surprised. One other piece of third-party packaging. Remember what was the name of the company? They did the very small run of Mario and Luigi in the Nintendo style box, the animated ones.
Yeah, I know the toy. I couldn't tell you what it's called.
Was it M.A.K Ideas?
M.A.K Ideas. That's it. Yeah, of course.
They did the little gauntlet. It was Iron Fist.
Right. Yes, of course. Yeah, they did that. And they did Pipes and Huffer style animated one, but then they repainted it into Mario and Luigi. And it was deliberately made to look like it was a worn NES game box as well, which was just super cool. That was a really nice thing to own.
I'd love to own because of that. Because obviously I love Nintendo. So that's
just because of the box.
Yeah, that's it.
It does draw you in, though, doesn't it? I mean, we were kind of starting this by me ever so slightly taking the mickey out of M.A.S. for hunting down a very specific Superfire Convoy box. But actually, I do. The more we talk about it, the more I am willing to say, the boxes are a draw for sure.
That Superfire Convoy is the least of the most embarrassing stories I have of tracking down packaging, man. Superfire Convoy is like that got sorted in a week. But other ones, no, it's like there are things where I would just buy the box. I don't even care if the contents are in it. Like the box would be a treasure to have. So there's lots of stories like that. Like I've gone crazy for a styro insert once.
That is actually one thing I do have for you to go with your Monster Munch and your alternators. I believe
the bubble inserts. Yeah, that's true. That's
some G1 bubble inserts for you.
That is going to be a really strange box to receive. That one. Good luck on the customs form. Like, what are you even going to say?
I don't know.
It's just loads of weird empty space.
Yes, it is, and crisps. Yeah. Well, that'll be fun. But
flavor of crisps.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Let's move on swiftly on before this is the last episode of this podcast ever. But no, Maz, you do love hunting down a box or two, don't you? That's one thing I've never done. I've never seeked out a box after I've had it, or if I'm missing it. Like if I have toys that come without a box or whatever it might be, I would never actively go and search for the box. But clearly people do, as I've already kind of alluded to as well.
Yeah, I mean, do you mind if I give you a couple of examples?
Go for it.
Actually, I think you were speaking about it in an episode recently where there are some things in Transformers that are so highly familiar that when something comes along that is 99% the same, but one element of it is quite different, it's the familiar but different, it can be really attractive. Now, whether that's just you get a Transformers box and it's a G1 sideswipe, but the car is yellow, you think, oh, okay, well, that's just slightly subtly different enough to be really attractive. Like that European Milton Bradley G1 Trax. So the box is a G1 Trax box. It's got a blue Trax on the box. It says MB in the corner, which is really cool because most G1 packaging has a Hasbro or Takara logo, and then this one's got MB, which we all know from our childhood from MB games. And then also, instead of a bubble, it's styro packaging inside, and it's a red Trax. That is such a cool combination of familiar but unfamiliar in a really well-known G1 Trax box with the flap and all the usual Transformers logos. It can be really attractive. And that's why I've been recently looking for carded pre-rub Canadian G1 mini-bots. Because it's a G1 mini-bot card. It's got the Hasbro logo on it. It's multilingual, so not only do you get the Hasbro name, but you get the French name for it as well, just in another box underneath it. That's different enough to be cool, considering you spent your whole life looking at G1 packaging in a certain way. And then also the robot points are on the front, which is the only G1 packaging where that's been done. There's just no space on the back because of the multilingual text, and it's a tiny mini-bot card. So they got the robot points on the front of the card, and that's just... it's so beautiful to me. It's just so strange that I had to track as many of those down as I could. Once, like Justra Diaclone, I collect purely because of the artwork. It's the packaging that sells me on that line. I've owned the contents. Like I've owned a G1 Mirage, I've owned a G1 Jazz, but it's just the one side of the box that is purely exclusive comic style artwork, gorgeous artwork, full size, that attracts me. And they look so incredible lined up together, those boxes. So incredible.
I take it you would never collect the boxes without the toys, though, right?
I would collect the boxes without the toys.
Would you? That's interesting.
Yeah, if the box for a Justra Diaclone smokescreen appeared on auction tomorrow, I'd go crazy for it because no one has ever seen it. There is no evidence of anyone ever seeing it or photographing it or describing it. So if it was to show up on eBay tomorrow, it would be the first instance we'd ever see its artwork. And this is an official release of a major Transformers toy, or Diaclone toy, that no one has ever seen the artwork for. And it's just out there somewhere. And I'd love to see it. And that's why I'm so attracted to that line.
That's great. That's
really like when the Wheeljack turned up, the Lancia, I mean, that was an amazing thing. Like I remember the loose toy was enough for me. I was like, okay, I'm going to buy this loose Wheeljack that this dude has because I know it came in a Justra Diaclone box. And I bought the sticker sheet for it 5 years prior on eBay, just lucky break. I was like, that's a Justra sticker sheet. Bought that. And it was like, okay, so I've got the sticker sheet from a toy that probably doesn't even exist anymore. Then some dude had the actual car. And I thought, well, okay, I'll buy the car as well. And he was going to sell it to me along with a couple of other Diaclones. And I went to pay him by PayPal, and he pasted his PayPal address incorrectly. So I sent the dude a whole bunch of money, and then I was like, oh my God, it's the wrong person. I've sent it to the wrong person. So I had to cancel the transaction. And back then it took like 7 days for it to be refunded onto your account. In the meantime, he said, okay, no problem. I'll just get these packaged up for you. And he'd gone to see his mum and his dad. And his mum and his dad had said to him, no, they came round to his house with some fruitcake. And they said, oh, we've also found a box of your old toys if you'd want them, or we know you're selling them. And in that box, along with the fruitcake, was the Justra Diaclone Wheeljack box that he'd never thrown away. And it still is the only example of that box that exists anyone knows about. And it was just such a gorgeous piece. Yeah. It's got the Lancia Stratios coming down a hill, and it's got Wheeljack's head with the really beautiful toy-style artwork, firing lasers, stamping on the ground. It's just... I remember when he sent me the picture, he said, oh, look what I found. I left the computer, I walked over to my bed, I put my head in a pillow, and I just screamed because I was that excited. I couldn't believe it. It was like first time in toy collecting history, this box has been found.
I genuinely thought that story was going to take a different turn when you said I went to my bed.
You have to drag the tone down. I'm telling you, like, the most successful collector hunting story I've got. This is like a magical story for me. You have to drag the tone down.
Just adding to it, just adding to it.
It's just forever going to be associated with that now, isn't it? Like, anyone listening to this is not going to see anything else. They're not going to see my pleasure. The pleasure is the wrong word.
My God, man.
Moving swiftly on.
You're making it worse.
Yep. Moving on.
That is an incredible story, by the way.
Do you know, it's funny because I was just about to say, before you just started that story, I was just about to say about some of these Diaclone boxes that they're probably in someone's mum's loft somewhere.
Absolutely.
Lo and behold, there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's how it is. And they're so rare. And like some 60-year-old dude from East London got in touch the other day and said, oh, I'm 60 years old. I'm selling toys. I used to buy all sorts of robot toys. Your website has the word Diaclone and this toy says Diaclone. Is it interesting to you? I was like, oh, that's a seemingly extraordinarily rare thing that no one's ever seen before. Yeah, sure, I'll take that off your hands. So they do pop up in the weirdest of places. But they have to because they just weren't in stores for long enough. I was
going to say, and yeah, it's not as well known as Transformers, is it? No. Really now, and all of that. So it's not got the same kind of, if people have a Transformer, they know it's a Transformer. Right. Whereas this is somewhat different, isn't it? I guess. And
on that topic, I was just talking to Paul Hitchens, who owns the Spacebridge Collectors Store down in the south of England, and he was talking about how one of the greatest pleasures of his job are people coming in with old toy collections. Star Wars, M.A.S.K, wrestling, WWF, Lego, Starcom, all this kind of stuff, Turtles. and they bring their old collections and they sell them to him, and he gets these really lovely vintage collections. What's the one thing that no one has brought in? Packaged G1 Transformers. Incredibly, that is the one thing that no one has brought into the store yet.
Do you think that's because people are more aware of it?
I think so, yeah. But then he gets loads of Star Wars, and people are aware of Star Wars. Oh. It's just like they're Transformers. He'd never got into the store. I think they just go straight to eBay or straight to Facebook.
Yeah.
Or live auctions.
It's a weird one, isn't it? So Transformers does seem to be slightly apart from a lot of toy lines in that regard, in terms of how it's how it permeates and things like that. It's really, really interesting.
It's how it's endured as well, compared to when you look at Masters Universe, M.A.S.K, all these other things. There's almost nothing else from the 80s that's lasted as long or rebounded in the same sort of way, other than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think it's just those two that have really maintained any kind of popularity, isn't it?
The Transformers will return after these messages.
Okay, so we're going to press the pause button on this discussion for now, as we've ended up going a teensy bit longer than we all anticipated. The triple takeover, lads. Talking loads. I know. Crazy, right? Wow. Episode 10 will actually be a special part 2 of this episode, and instead of the usual fortnightly wait, it will actually be available next Tuesday. Yes, you heard that right. Just a single week to wait. In the meantime, you can interact with us on all our social media channels. Why don't you let us know what your favourite packaging is, or if you've got any interesting packaging stories. We are at @triple_takeover on Instagram and Twitter, and for Facebook, it's triple takeover, all one word. I know technically it's 2 words, but you know what I mean. If you want to check out our individual content, you can find Maz at TFsquareone, Sixo at SixoTF, and me at Toybox Soapbox, and all the usual social media spaces. And if you're a big Sixo fan, and who isn't, he's also on YouTube. Go give his face a watch. Join us again next week for part 2 of this discussion on all things that you're meant to throw away. They think it's all over. Well, it isn't now, because there's another part next week. So, yeah. See you then.